Councilmember Bell.
Here.
Councilmember Cousins.
Here.
Councilmember Fick. Councilmember Knight. Here. Councilmember Michelle's.
Present.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Mayor Keough.
Here.
And student reps Andrew Covert
Here.
and Isabella Mallett.
Is it possible that we could actually list their names and that they were present here? Is there possible to do that?
I will put it
Either
in the
somewhere
minutes.
below or so that they're known that they are here, so that it's actually recorded somewhere that they're here?
Yeah, they're in the minutes.
I know that.
You mean on the agenda?
but- Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I don't know. It's the-
Okay, we have 5 sets of meeting minutes for approval. It's been a busy 3 weeks apparently.
I did a raise.
Right, yeah.
I'll move all 5 sets of minutes for approval.
And I'll second.
Moved by Smith, second by Knight. Thank you both. Mr. Smith, did you have any?
One very minor one on page 12. Page 12, number 4, under the Parks and Recreation Commission. Chair introduced, should be members rather than
Yes.
just. That's all I have.
This Knight, did you have anything?
No.
Any other comments from council? Mr. Michelle?
Yep. On page 1, under C, closed session for the purpose of the city manager review, was the closed session requested by the manager? My understanding is that MCL requires the individual requested, and if it was, it should reflect that.
Yeah, we actually did do that at the meeting.
Okay, but just add that on there.
I can put it right in the motion that was requested by, if that's what.
I would like to ask council if it's appropriate to have a little note under my absence that indicates that I was at the school board meeting on behalf of this board to represent.
That'd be fine.
That'd be okay if we added that?
What page?
I'm sorry, Carol, 5 of the, but it's the first page of the April 22nd meeting minutes.
Okay, where it says, yeah, okay.
And then item G on page 6, I think the first sentence was incomplete.
On which page?
On page 6 of 152. It ends with agenda item of the,
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure what was intended there, but if we could just, we could even end it at agenda item period.
I think that's what it was, yeah.
And then under number 6, city manager report, the second to last bullet, I believe the second date should have been May 15, not 16 for budget workshop.
Okay.
I don't know if we have it or not, but it would have been the 15th if it was the date, it wasn't the
Yeah,
16th.
14 days. From first.
Thank you. Read through. So any further comments on the minutes? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of approving the 5 sets of meeting minutes with the changes as proposed, signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. We have no prearranged participation, so we're down to approval of the agenda. And we do have a couple pieces of paper in front of us, or at least I have a couple. There's a map related to phase 2 that everybody should have of the Milford Park. If they don't think there's necessarily an action item, but the purple sheet of paper is consideration of cost increase for the water tower project.
I can just go on consent unless anyone has any concern on it. It's just a small increase for a few extra items so that they can finish up.
Whatever council's preference is, if everybody had a chance to read it.
I'll move the agenda with the water tower item under consent.
Moved by Smith,
And that would be
second by Bell.
item number 5 under consent.
Thank you, so that'd be J5? Yes. Okay. Let's get that done. Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on the agenda this evening? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the agenda with the additional item under the consent agenda, signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. Okay, we have no public hearings this evening. So we're down to non-arranged participations. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak this evening? Seeing none, then we'll move on to communications. There were 3 in the packet. The upcoming meeting list, our regular notification of the sign calendar, and then a notice about the Webster Township Master Plan. Any comments on the communications?
Question.
Oh, yep, I'm sorry, Mr. Rowe.
So the meeting calendar doesn't include the previously tentatively scheduled budget work session on the 15th. You're not having that?
Yeah, I thought that we had decided not to have it.
Yeah, I thought so
If I
too,
had
but-
anything else, I'd just bring it on
Okay.
an agenda,
Super.
or, well, for the budget
I
public
just wanted to
hearing.
be sure.
Yeah.
Okay,
That would be
thanks.
Mr. Michelle.
The meeting calendar, Cap Dart, it looks like we've switched to the first Wednesday of the month. So they've already had the one for May, June one will be the first Wednesday. of the month.
Okay. Thank you. Any other clarifications? Mr. Cousins?
Well, the chamber board met again, without me, again. All right. They claim it was a miscommunication, but the room, the meeting space, as well as the time were different. I have been assured that I will be included in the next one, and so I will let you know, okay?
Yeah, and let Justin know to,
What's that?
and let Justin know where to put it on the
I will.
calendar.
The next meeting is supposed to be the 4th, Monday, and it's supposed to be at the library. That's what I've been told, okay?
So not one in May then,
This one in May will be...
but that'll be Memorial Day, right?
Well, the Tuesday, excuse me.
Okay, so Tuesday, at the library.
It'll be Tuesday at the library, okay? That's what I've been told. That could change, because they have a tendency to change space and time, okay? I've asked for 2 items. One of them is the bylaws, and the second one is
Theirs?
excuse me,
A copy of theirs?
of their bylaws. Okay, thanks, Don. Yes, of their bylaws, and also a copy was given to me of a bill from the state about taxes. Okay, and we're trying to sort through those. They are trying to sort through those right now. Okay? So I'll keep you informed when I find out a little bit more information about that. They have 5 members right now and they need 3 more. 2 more, I guess, okay, to make legitimately a quorum that they have, supposed to have. So they're out searching for people. If you know any business people, actually you don't have to be a business person. You can actually join. Any of us could join, just pay the business. Okay, so.
You just may or may not get invited to the meeting.
You never know. If you want to know, I was informed it was going to be at noon, and I got there, and nobody was there, and I called, and they said, well, no, we had them at 9 o'clock. And I said, oh, good, I wasn't there at 9 o'clock. Needless to say, I was just a little warm under the collar. Okay.
Understandably so. Thanks for trying to go.
I've been working at it.
Okay, am I missing a hand? Anybody else have comments under communications? Okay, first report tonight is from our Public Services Superintendent. The only one without a name tag over there. So I don't know your name. Why don't you introduce yourself? How are you, Dan?
Good evening, council.
Good evening.
provided you with a 2-week written report or 3-week written report. I've also got a couple updates I'd like to go over first. The first one is the water tower. The way it looks right now is 15th to 16th, the curing process will be done in the tower. As every day goes by, it's going to get a little closer, but the 16th, the latest, is what we're looking at. We've got a little bit after we do that, we've got back to sample chlorination, so I think the deadline that we set on ourselves for the 23rd, we're going to be able to meet that. With the weather the way it was, with it being cool and raining, which is great for the lawns and everything else, it makes the process of drying the primer and the final paint a little bit harder. Takes a little bit longer because they need to meet temperature. They've had generators out there and heaters and everything else, so we look good there. My second update is on the secondary digester lid. A few weeks back, 3 weeks back, we did a phone conference with staff, F&V, and West Tech that engineered and designed our lid on our secondary digester. After we had that, we asked West Tech to put an action plan together for us so we knew what steps we could do in-house to try to get that lid back to floating like it's supposed to with biogas. The first thing we needed to do was make sure we didn't have any gas leaks, biogas leaks. So we've done that and we don't have any leaks. The second is to get biotech in here to empty that tank, which they did Friday. The third is to, on the top of the tank, there's guides that go into a rail that actually fix that cover to go up and down. They want us to take them guides off. We couldn't do it today because it was still a little wet on top of the digester. We're going to try to do that Tuesday or Wednesday. 3 of those guides are pressing against the rail itself, and they wanted us to pull them off so we can look down the rail to see if there's any debris or anything that's hampering that lid to go up and down. So we're going to try to do that this week. And then after we get done doing that, if there isn't anything in there, we'll wash it out if there is. If we can, we'll put the guides back where they need to be, and then we need to get sludge in there, and we'll start over. And if that doesn't work, I'll have to come back to you with another plan after we get the team back together, but we're hoping that's going to be successful. One of the problems we have is we got a skirt that runs down the side of that big tank, and the guides on the bottom are welded. So there's not any adjustment that F&V, when they went in and they looked at the inside of the tank, they really couldn't see how them guides were running in the rail on the bottom. So hopefully we'll be successful with what we're doing up top, but if not, I'll be reporting back to you.
Everything you're doing is from the top on the outside?
Outside, top, safety, no confined space, everything's safe.
Okay.
The tank's completely empty and already been hosed down and cleaned out by biotech. And then we actually moved 60,000 from the primary, so it's going to be a month before any sludge actually goes in the secondary digester. So we have been performing that. We've got gas monitors and everything that all our guys have when they go on top of the lid for just preventative maintenance on the PRV valves and different things. Good. If it gets any farther than that, then we're going to have to come up with an additional plan. That's the 2 updates I have. Do you have any questions on my report?
We included the letter from the DEQ just so you would see that that's kind of the next thing we're working on as far as the lead and copper implementation, making a list of the known areas we have, galvanized services. So that's something OHM is helping with, going through the records from our various projects.
And we've done a lot of projects in the last 15 years, so we've got a lot of good records to be able to work forward on this new inventory that they want us to do.
Dan, how's Northern United doing?
I got a phone call from Tony late last week, and he was talking to me about working with them on their sample procedures and the amount of samples that they've got to take that lets us know what they're discharging to the wastewater. And they were having problems with paying those bills. They're about, I think, $1,200 to $1,500 a week to be able to, for them to go to an outside company to supply that service. Throughout the years of working with Tony and NEPCO, we've tried to come up with different ideas, cost savings, on how they could save costs by buying a sampler. Just a sampler alone is $400 every time they show up when you're hiring an outside contractor. We also are looking into possibly asking them to sample less But the only way I know what they're doing, or anybody else, whether it's Alpha Metal, is the sampling procedures that they give to us. That's how we know what they're actually delivering to the wastewater treatment plant, and they're staying within the limits of what they purchased when they bought that piece of property. So we're going through and looking at the sampling procedures, seeing if we can cut some costs for them to help them out a little bit with his bottom line. One of the things that I did look at today, I had Andrea put something together. They have been in compliance with their suspended solids since July of 2017. They have been in compliance with their BOD since September of 2017. They have been in compliance with their phosphorus since September of 2018. So they have been doing a really good job with their pre-treatment and everything they got going over there. But the bottom line is for me, and why I'm here, is to make sure that everybody's getting charged for the amount of capacity that they're using at the wastewater treatment plant. Because that's important. So we're going to work with Tony and try to help him out. He was looking for help for like 3 or 4 months. So we're looking at different things. My team is, obviously, we're going to bring it back to Courtney before we go any farther with it, and how to save him costs the next 3 or 4 months so he can get things working a little bit better in that for his company.
Thank you for the update on that.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much, Dan.
Thank you.
Next up is our Community Development Manager, Michelle. How are you?
I'm fine. How's council this evening? I don't even need a microphone. Okay. Everybody's doing well? Students? You learning a lot? Good.
They wouldn't tell you if they did.
I have ways of making them talk. I am a mother, so. Okay, so seriously, you have my report in front of you. Do you have any questions before I go into the update? Okie dokie. So, you'll notice that, excuse me, one of the things that's in my report is Orchard River Hills sign request. They want to do an entrance sign, not like the one that Huron Farms has, but have that presence, something that shows, lets people know as they're coming into the subdivision where they're at. So, as I pointed out in my report, I've explained to them that the location they want is city property, and excuse me, in order for staff or council to really consider that kind of request, it needs to be in writing. So they have provided it in writing. They are asking for a sign that's larger than sign regulations would allow, and they're going to correct that, but I should have a memo for you regarding what they're requesting at your next meeting. But if you have feedback for me, if this is something you don't feel you'd be comfortable with having on public property, then it would behoove you to let me know now so that I'm not stringing their HOA along.
Is city property the only appropriate place to put a sign that would meet their need?
I don't know if it's the only place. It's the desired location they have right now.
Understood.
The quick research that I've done, it's limited. If they moved to the roundabout on Ryan Drive, and I believe that's Wilson, you're already into the subdivision, and so that is not their preferred location, but that is an option. And depending on how they were to, excuse me, construct the sign, I don't think it would block visibility because the sign requirements don't allow something to be that tall. But again, you're already into the subdivision by a few lots, which leaves what you've got then is just each of the lots moving forward. And there's not a lot of room on those lots, so, you know.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Bell, then Ms. Knight. Oh, go ahead. Say it.
How many lots or parcels are in Orchard Hills? Do you know? I'm trying to look at the boundaries here.
I'm trying to remember, I did a full, you've got somewhere between 25 and 50 lots, I would believe.
Between 25.
25 and 50? Just a quick looking at this.
Yeah, it's really just the front of the sub there, right behind the park, so.
I didn't even realize we had a Orchard Hills subdivision. I didn't know
I
the
didn't know
name of
until I
that.
was here 2 years that we had that, so.
I thought it was.
I thought it was all Huron Farms.
Right.
It was initially,
What he would tell you.
all of Huron Farms was initially proposed as this Orchard Rivers Hills, but their developer went belly up and Norfolk came in, and so.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
If this does come back before council, 2 questions I will probably have are, is it legal for
To
us
put
to
in?
allow that? And is it precedent? And I don't need the answers now, but those are a couple of questions that I'll ask if it does come before us for a decision.
Okay, and then we'll have answers for you. Okay, what was the other thing? Oh, the other update I have, as you know, we've been working with Avalon on their, getting them ready to submit their plans. And the sticking point at this particular point is that shared driveway, or the idea that there'd be a shared driveway directly across from the school's existing driveway, and how would that work with DTE? And DTE is very hesitant to make any affirmative decision on the shared parking or the shared driveway because they don't have their site design yet. And so they're as Sean and Courtney know in dealing with them with the Broad Street property, that unknown risk is a very hard thing for them to work with. I was able to have a very long conversation, very good conversation with Anthony today at DTE, and got him to, because he's in the planning side, he understands the planning process as well as the engineering. And I got him to understand that from Avalon's standpoint, their risk is significantly more in the sense that this whole project could literally not happen. And I explained that because Avalon has to have an approved site plan before they go to MISHDA, any approvals that they get from MISHDA, all the points that would be gotten based on this quality plan come into question if that plan has to change for any reason. So while we have a process to address changes to an approved site plan, that doesn't hold a lot of weight for MISHDA because they have a whole separate set of criteria for awarding the LIHTC credits that Avalon's going for. So once I was able to explain that to Anthony, he really got it. And so we talked about getting a meeting together with DTE and Avalon in the city and see if there's not some way we can work out this hurdle. Because it is significant, and I don't know that, how this will impact Avalon's decision to go forward if they don't have some comfort coming from DTE. So that's where we're at. We're hoping either the rest of this week or sometime into next week. And that's it. That's all I got. Unless you've got any questions for me.
Michelle, when you try to set up the meeting on June 6th, if you could try to do that in the morning, I would appreciate it.
June 6th? Oh, yeah, with Norfolk.
Yes, please. I don't know how much the rest of the committee, but just...
Before 9?
No, it doesn't have to be that early, just the morning would be...
Okay. The other thing that came up, we got an announcement from SEMCOG. They do the regional update each week. This week's regional update had what's called a multi-jurisdictional planning grant opportunity. So for planning projects, whether they're like what we had with Mr. Heisler when he was asking for annexation, or whether you've got a natural resource issue, whether that's water, trails, etc. If you've got multiple jurisdictions, agencies that need to do something, there's a planning grant through SEMCOG. I believe it was a $50,000. I don't know the match or anything like that. But I did talk with Courtney and reached out to Paul to find out who is the contact with the Huron River Watershed Council. And I'm going to toss this ball over to Paul and let him speak on it a little bit. We interacted, but it sounds like Paul will be integral in helping me bring this meeting together to see if people are interested. So.
I got that email, and I think the property that we're talking about, I think most people know, it's just reviewed. That's that possible canoe site there at the corner of Huron River Drive and Mass Road. That's to the north and immediately to the riverside. Still for sale. There was some preliminary work done by Elizabeth Riggs, who's no longer with Watershed Council, but that was the idea of trying to get a parking lot there and a canoe livery there to alleviate a number of the problems there, parking along that area there, along the road, parking in the parking lot of the cider mill, along Huron Street there, all the way clear down, a long ways. And that was part of the reason, as well as all the other issues that come about when there's a hot day and there's a lot of people come out at that site when it's legally not a spot to come out. So it was kind of just left to the number of people there. We were talking to HCMA, we were talking to the Washington County Parks, the Huron Watershed Council, obviously, Webster Township, and of course the city being there, and the rookies. All those groups need to be, and that's where Michelle talked about the multi-jurisdictional. So I told her I would reach out to this council to make sure that they understand, which we're doing right now, as well as to the Watershed Council. I'll do that this week, and then also I think we should reach out to the Road Commission and to Washington County Parks and to HCMA, because they're all involved in that potential solution of that problem there. So if we could do that, that would be great. It's one of those things we did do when we got the viaduct completed there. We had a lot of multi-jurisdictional groups there that had that come together for that. It's kind of rare that happened, but it did. So that's what I have on that.
Thank you.
Very good. Any further questions for Michelle? Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate the update. There's a written report from our Washington County Sheriff's Office for the month of April in the packet.
Do we know why there's such a significant decrease in the number of traffic crashes? There's a lot of variability in medical in those calls, but that seems to be a huge drop, 83%.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, it could have just been winter or, yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I can ask Al. I did ask about, because it seemed like there was a lot of sort of the suspicious calls, and those are just kind of all over the board, just something that doesn't fit into a category. I mean, there wasn't anything that stuck out as being, it could just be a car that was parked in a place and someone thought it shouldn't, or,
One of them was me.
Okay,
I
that's
had a frosty plastic cover over my license plate. It is illegal to have that on there. Now Meyer needs to know that because they sold it to me.
Oh, right.
But it was that kind of, I was just one of the strange ones.
But yeah, I can ask if he said anything. I'm wondering if that was maybe the whole area number. Because I don't think there was 70 in a month in 2018.
Yeah, well, and especially in that period.
Right. Yeah, I think
There's only one street in or out of town, so you
Right.
can imagine the work.
Oh, at this time
high
last
volume.
year, right? Yeah. Yeah, that could have been the issue. That maybe that was the whole area.
We'll follow up on that then. Okay. Other questions on the sheriff's report? Okay, we'll move down to our city manager report. Courtney.
So So I provided information about the fireworks law change. The state did make some small changes in 2018 that did modify the hours. And so I included our ordinance and the new fact sheet on the law. So if that's something council wants to take up to make our ordinance conform with state law, let me know and we can do that. The water school is tomorrow, so about 25 people will be attending. That'll be attending that school, and they'll be here in Dexter at 1:30 to 2:30, and then they go over to Mexico to see the EcoVolt system from 2:30 to like 3:15. So I put together a packet of materials, and so I'm looking forward to that. It'll be myself, I think Paul's gonna come, Aaron Burkle from the Road Commission, Andrea Klein, formerly of ECT, who worked on the park project, and then the member of Trout Unlimited. I know at the public meeting, or at our council commission meeting, which I think everybody enjoyed, it seemed like we got good feedback from the commissioners that they like to meet each other and have a chance to talk about priorities, so I think that went well. We did talk about potentially using like Instagram or Twitter for the farmers market. So I wasn't sure how council wanted to. I know Dana she's been posting a lot on Facebook, which I think has been helpful, and so she'd like to try to expand into those other things. I just wasn't sure how you guys wanted to do that, if we could, try with the market and see how it went, or if you wanted to take formal action, or how.
We have some sort of social media policy, I assume, since we've got a presence on Facebook presently, right?
No, we don't have anything formal, no. That was always an intention of the website committee that
we should probably get on that. I'd have no objection to Instagram. I think if we want people under 40 online to know about it, it's probably the best.
Especially for the market, because she takes a lot of pictures and posts them so people can see what's actually there, which I think is helpful.
Yeah, I'm all in support of that. I'm also in support of updating the fireworks law. Because ours goes till like 1 o'clock in the morning and the others limits it to at least 11:45. I don't see any reason for ours to be a lot broader. I didn't read it word for word to compare, but I noticed the end.
The time is really the main thing. They kind of limited the holidays, but none of those are an issue anyway. No one's really using the other dates. It's just the 4th of July. For the vast majority of the issue.
And usually the complaints are the later, the later they allowed.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Regarding the social media, I would go ahead and let the market experiment with that.
Okay.
And then at the end of the season, we can, get some feedback on that. And then we can decide what type of policy we need.
And staff is still the administrator on everything as well. She doesn't have anything that we don't see. And with the market, as long as she's posting something market, related, I think. Some of you may know that the Chamber's having an ice cream social at Dexter Crossing on May 18th from 10 to 2. So it's not really a city. Did you not hear this? Okay, scooping you.
I don't know.
Want to make sure you knew.
They also have golf out there. I don't know. How many people there signed up? Are you signed up, Sean?
no,
Oh, okay.
I'm not even sure I know what it is.
Okay.
So that's,
It's usually
yeah.
in June. It's usually in June, I think.
I think it was from 10 to 2. It'll go out in my email update this week, so that people are aware of it. I saw she sent an email about it today. So they're using the fencing that they help pay for, our white fencing. The guys will drop that off Friday. So the city isn't really involved because it's private property. They did do a permit, but more of a special event permit. No road closures are necessary.
Where is it taking place?
In the Dexter Crossing parking lot.
It's with the new ice cream place.
Well, it's with everything,
It's
actually.
with everything, but yeah, they're featuring their.
Because it said something about test drives too, and it's wrong.
LaFontaine's involved, and
We're working out, trying to figure out how they're going to integrate the LaFontaine with everything else. So.
right, because they're using in front of Country Market as well. So both property owners have signed off, at least the former property owner of Country Market. I think it changed last week, but so they signed off, and then the Oxford signed off. So it's really up. we're just kind of helping them with, okay, keeping the people separate from the cars is, you know, just kind of good practice. That's probably about it.
Probably want to get it done before the new ice cream place comes out there.
Yeah, well, Paul seemed to, or
I
you
think
seemed to
they're
think that
going
they're,
to be involved with what I heard.
yeah, I mean, that'd be a good idea. They're providing the ice cream, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah, I did provide the, I guess, Sean or I, but the updated map that's in front of you is a route for the trail that comes out to Baker that they were working on with the schools. The issue was where the trail was going to come out, and they wanted to come out as far away from their parking lot as possible. So that's showing 2 options. And if you want to go out there and see where it is, if you haven't taken one of the many tours of the path alignment, it's staked now, so you can follow it back and see what we've been talking about.
So it's staked from Baker Road west to just about past the ball fields. It's not staked out into the more natural area.
That was really over there.
In case you're looking for flags when you go down the end of Mill Creek Park or something, you're not going to see them, you know, there.
It is a fairly substantial drop in elevation.
Yeah, when you walk in, it's pretty substantial. Go from the ball fields to the path, and then from the path to the storm structure.
So just to stay on that topic while we're on it, Courtney and I did have a meeting with Dr. Timmis and Dr. Rashke last Wednesday, I guess it was, and they on the whiteboard in Dr. Timmis's office, they had written down some prices for land purchases that the schools have made over the last 10, 11 years. They bought 85 acres off the Sloan family in 2008, which is the property south of the high school. They bought the Naylor property and the Dalton property, which are 2 properties on Shield Road, adjacent to the Creekside property. They bought the Avery property most recently in 2013, which is a half an acre for about $200,000 for that half acre. And you know, during the discussion, you know, I acknowledge that, you know, the property that we're buying, or not buying, or that we're buying an easement across is, you know, Old City Township. It's a dumping area. It was poor soils. It's poor. It's never really been maintained. It's debris ridden, and they were suggesting that it should be a price per acre more consistent with their more recent purchases, which would have put it about $400,000 an acre. You know, and keep in mind, we only need 0.4 acres, you know, plus the right to have temporary access to build the property. So if you average the cost of all their land purchases, it's about $33,000 an acre that they've bought 90-some acres over the last 11 years. And just so you're aware, I threw out $20,000 as the reasonable cost for a half an acre. And my basis was, you know, roughly the 30-some thousand an acre that I was doing quick math in my head while I was in the room. Plus they've been paying interest on it for, you know, however many years they've bonded for it, because they didn't have that cash any more than we would have the cash. So, you know, with interest another 40% to 30, I got up to 40 or 45. Half an acre is about 20. So I threw that out there as Sean's logic for whatever it's worth. I said, you know, I'm not trying to sound scientific or insulting, or that's, you know, where my head is on this. They never really threw a number out there, but they suggested that they needed to have justification for the number. And I was trying to provide some for them. But on Friday afternoon, a little before, right around 4 o'clock, I guess, Dr. Timmis called and asked if we would split the cost of an appraisal. And I said, well, I don't, make those decisions. I said, why do you want to get it appraised? And I said, just to hear what he had to say. And he says, well, we need the justification. And I said, well, what is, I'd be interested to know who are you going to use, and how long would an appraisal take, and what would it cost? I said, and then once we learned that, I said, what kind of comparables are you going to use to compare to land that is debris ridden with tires, glass bottles, cans, metal sharp objects along the side of a wetland area? I said it can't be any of the things that you just put on the wall. He didn't have a good answer for that. And so he agreed that he'd get a price and get back to me. And within about 20 minutes or less, he called Jerry Brand from Granger, formerly from Granger, and apparently told Jerry to contact their appraiser and get started on it, because Jerry reached out to Justin and asked for a map of where it was. I emailed Dr. Timmis over the weekend and didn't hear back from him at all today on this topic. So I haven't committed to an appraisal. Frankly, I'd rather, if it's $5,000 or $8,000 or whatever it would be for an appraisal, I'd rather give them that money than put it into an appraisal. And but if you have guidance or thoughts, at this point we're waiting on them. I believe Dr. Ashby is on vacation this week, so I don't assume they'll make any decisions or do much without their finance director being a part of that. But that's where we are. I told them that we don't have a lot of money to pay for an easement across land that they're not going to use for anything else. This year, I said the bids for Central Street came in $277,000 higher than we had anticipated. I said we're trying to plan for some public improvements, which keep getting more extensive every time. No offense here, every time our engineers touch it. And along with the sidewalk on Forest and such, and that it's a tough year for us to we don't have a lot of money floating around, and we want to pay a fair price, but not overpay for it. And that's sort of where the conversation was left at the end of last week. So if you have thoughts, or if you know of land that's got debris on it, and I can send over as a comparable that somebody bought, I want to try to take this one step at a time. They are aware of our deadline. They did a really good job on a week ago, approving our letter for the MDEQ application. I understand that application has not quite been submitted, but will be submitted this week. The next steps are the school board's facility committee are supposed to go out there and visually see where the center line of the path. These stakes are on the center line of the path, so you can envision 7 feet one side and 7 feet the other side, in terms of where it will ultimately be. It's tucked in there quite nicely when you get down past the schools, down past the ball field. If you've been back there, it's back into the woods. I mean, they've got it in there. It's not close by any stretch. But they're supposed to give us the okay on a preference, and then Courtney and staff will work with Orchard Hills and McClement and get an easement description of the center line, depending on which 1, 2, or 3 option is selected over there at the Baker Road Port.
Did they reveal when they acquired that property?
The Creekside property? The actual, this right here?
Yeah.
Well, I checked in with my resident historian, Paul, on Friday or late in the day. He thinks that, let me get there, you got there in 63 and taught there in 63, and they had it before that.
So they haven't been still paying a bond on that?
Oh, no, they're 50 years,
Yeah.
I mean, they're 50-some, 60 probably years into owning that property.
Yes, that was the old high school property. It was back 56, 57, something, like
That's
that,
about
before
what
they
you
even
got.
built.
57 is when I said
Yeah, I
didn't
think so.
know.
Mhm.
And it was a farm before that.
Yeah.
So they've owned it, 60
Yeah.
years or 60
Then-
years.
Because who did the dump belong to? The village? or?
Well, the story Paul mentioned is that the farmer that owned it had sort of stuff going in that area
Well, the
prior
farmer
to
had an
them.
area on the back that he kept dumping stuff over in the, on the burn side there into the wetland area there, This is where the baseball field is there, where it is along with that one tree line there, and then it drops off. But when I came, 3 days a week, they used to come in. Scioto Township was the one that actually used that as their dump, okay? And that was a period of time where they would, most of the time was things like Sean has described, was old refrigerators, tires, anything that was in that type of thing. There were times though that there was other dumps that was dumped in there. People would come in and dump stuff. Sometimes there was a fire there, they would burn something. That was rare, but that did happen once in a while. There were some wild cats and dogs that were there periodically as well. Okay? I know because my window, my teaching was looked straight out across the football field of that spot. If you sat, as Carol would know, you sat in a football game when they kicked an extra point or a field goal, it went into the dump.
Well, it's very visible, even in the hill that they constructed, or the bank that they constructed from the ball fields down towards the stream. There are pieces of metal that are sticking up out of the restoration, like
Tires.
Which has not been, removed.
You can still see refrigerators.
You can see tires and old rusty pieces of metal and bottle caps and.
Not in fantastic condition.
And so back then, they probably didn't pay a lot for it.
Yeah, so what we're hoping to get from them is some indication. I think they're going forward with an appraisal. I don't know, if we're willing to do that or not willing to do that. You can please comment on that. They're supposed to be sharing a copy of the draft easement language that Miller Canfield is drafting. They verbally talked about that when we were in Dr. Timmis's office, and it didn't sound like they had a ton of conditions that they were placing on it, but, until we see the language, it'll probably be
But
layered up.
an appraisal would be fine if we were trying to buy it. For an easement, to me, you can't price it at the rate that you would sell it for, or like that.
But that's where we are with our conversation with them. And they have helped us move the project forward, at least that they're on the same page, and I thanked them a couple times. I wanted to thank them publicly in my write-up here today, and I'm assuming we'll get there. I just don't know what the number's going to be at the end of the day.
I know they're using later figures on some of their figures they gave you, lands that they purchased. We also have to remember that 12 years ago, the library wanted to buy 10 acres out there on Parker Road, and it was going to be sold to them for $100,000. That's $10,000 an acre. Divide that in half, it's $5,000 an acre for wooded land out there. So if you go out there and look at that process, it can't be worth. And that was virgin land that didn't have anything on it except trees.
Yeah, I think.
That was 12 years ago, I realized that, but.
I think there's ample justification to sell us the property, or to sell us an easement across the property if they want to do it. They just have to find it, and we have to help them, so.
And we provided them the burner purchase because they have land along the creek. And then we also the cemetery easement or the cemetery purchase, because the burner and the cemetery were both purchases of property along the river. And then the Jenkins property they received for $1. So
Did they include that in their?
They did not include the dollar.
I'm not sure how many acres that is, but no.
But so my logic is that, it's 20 to 30,000 an acre is what I think the land's, worth, at least in what I can reconcile. If somebody else shows me some figures, I'll be happy to change my mind, but I certainly don't think it's 200,000 or 400,000 an acre. But if anybody has another opinion, or real estate moguls, let me know. We kind of merged Courtney's report into part of what I was going to say in my report. Courtney, I didn't mean to cut you off. Do you have more?
We did get our state historic preservation office clearance for the project, so that was a big one. That was filed way back in like October, November or something, so that's taken care of. Yeah, I don't think so. Everything else is really done.
I did a proclamation at the request of the American Legion Auxiliary that was in the packet, and I also wanted to just mention that typically if there's a local Girl Scout that receives the Gold Award, I write them a letter of congratulations, and we issue a certificate of appreciation for their work in the community. So there's one of those going out. Just read her name properly. It's Ainsley Grace. If anybody knows her, she's getting a certificate of appreciation as well. So just wanted to point those couple things out. Anybody have any questions for me? Okay. I'll move on to consent agenda then, please.
I move we approve the 4 items listed on the consent agenda. Bills and payroll in the amount of $829,022.72. The closure of Central Street between Main and Fifth during the Memorial Day Parade and Ceremony. The closure of the alley between Monument Park Building and 8005 Main on Thursday for the Shop of the Cop fundraiser. And the setting of a public hearing for June 10th for the water and sewer rate ordinance.
And also the item we added down, if you would please.
Oh,
the
this
increase,
one was the
the
purpose.
purple sheet, the increase for the water tower.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, the increase of cost of the water tower project. Do I need to have any,
Yeah, it's up from 125 to 133.
let me see what they're reading on here.
I rounded up.
It's-
Okay,
yeah.
all right. Yeah, 132,300, I got it. 5 items of stuff consent agenda.
Okay.
Sorry, guys.
No, that's great. Thanks for reading that. Motion by Donna, or motion by Ms. Fisher. Second by Mr. Smith. Thank you both. All those in favor of approving the 5 items on the consent agenda, signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. Okay, we're down to old business item 1, discussion of the town hall meeting from April 27th. Well, I guess I'll start. I mean, I actually provided a few of my takeaways in my report there, but since we're covering on a separate agenda, I didn't feel like we should cover those under my report. You know, I did some talking, tried to facilitate the meeting as best I could, given that we were having David Kassan be our lead presenter. Some of you had a chance to speak. Others did not. You know, I think the good news from the questions that I heard is that I don't think there was anybody that suggested that we shouldn't try to improve both of the facilities. Nobody said you're crazy for thinking about this. I think they all get that there's a need, right? I think that, you know, we presented a lot of information, and for some people, I think it was too much. Others, I think it was okay. If you were new to the topic, I think you got a lot of information. If the topic was an old one for you, I think you might have been bored for have to repeat some stuff, or maybe we were too slow in moving through the information. You know, people seemed to clap when we talked about efficiency in doing something. I heard clapping twice. I don't know if you heard it or saw it. There were a lot of questions on the response time. There were a lot of people questioning, do we need to build that much if we're serving 3 communities? They had questions on the agreement. Other thoughts? Ms. Knight?
I thought it was very well attended. I was very, very pleased with the attendance and the amount of people here and the amount of people that got up and spoke. I sensed that there was a lot of confusion about the presentation. it's particularly the beginning, and what I'm reading from the feedback is it did seem to kind of level out at the end, and that was a little more understandable at that time. I heard the people clap, not all of them. It did happen a couple times for certain things. And when I'm sensing from the feedback is it's kind of split their position of where they want to be and what they want to do. But I agree that they do feel something needs to be done. Absolutely.
Mr. Smith?
I was pleased to see that a number of people in their feedback mentioned the Copeland property. And because I had been looking at that before as a possibility. Recently, a little more details came out online about the Encore's discussion with the school about trying to work something out there.
The school did discuss that at the meeting Justin and I went to on this last week.
Yeah.
They're moving forward with a purchase agreement. They basically approved the terms of the purchase agreement that they want to see, and then the facility committee can finalize the purchase agreement.
Courtney, is that the whole building?
As far as I know,
Okay.
for the whole site.
Yeah, because they talked about the school board wanted to make sure that the price meets the appraisal. The building and future site use will remain consistent with its current use.
And they changed that after some debate
Did they?
to, what was the word they used, Doug? Instead of consistent, wasn't it, Justin, do you remember the word they changed it to? It's like a little bit less severe than consistent, because they felt like consistent was like a school. So they changed it to like compatible maybe. Was the word.
I think
Compatible, so.
Must be a place for the Dexter senior citizens. And as a consideration for the high school drama needs to be incorporated. You know, it get down to where they're talking about land contract. So I doubt if, there's any opportunity there for us to look at that any further, so. Seems like that's a pretty done deal.
That's your read of that, is that it's a done deal? That's your read of that, is that it's a done deal?
I mean, it's definitely
Is that how it sounded at the meeting too?
I mean,
it's moving in that direction.
Right, I mean, they gave them the permission to enter into the purchase agreement subject to those terms, so.
Because they have a timetable there, and
They were expecting some earnest, they were debated a little bit about when they wanted the earnest money.
yeah. And the superintendent had sent out a memo to the school district because before they had canceled a day off for students on May 24th, but now with stuff that took place in the legislature up in Lansing, they were able to reinstate that day off and use it for teacher in-service. But along in that memo there, he talked about baits and things that are moving to baits this year and then next year. So it kind of matches the timetable that's laid out in the Encore article.
They didn't mention the name of the purchaser at all at the meeting. But they must have said subsequently if it's in the article that way. But
I don't know whether it was in the memo or not,
Yeah.
whether specifically, but
The packet at the 22nd meeting that Justin and I attended had reference to a meeting with Jan Clark written in there, if I remember right. But I agree, they didn't talk about that at the meeting. Well, does anybody feel like we need another meeting with the public?
Well, my takeaway is I have very little confidence in Mr. Gasson being the lead presenter in a public meeting like that. It wandered, and that's not all his fault. It's we didn't give him a clear charge of what's the purpose of this meeting. It wasn't to collect opinions on what policy we should do, what's the most important as part of this decision. It wasn't necessarily to give an update of what we've done this past year. It wasn't, here's what we decide is the best plan, and this is why we're going to be asking for money for it. So it was schizophrenic because it didn't have that flag planted. It would have been very easy for him to cut 20 minutes out of that. A lot of the folks I've spoken to were, well, they didn't sound likely to want to come to another public meeting after sitting through that. And that's terrible that we've had that meeting, which is important to share this information, that was run in such a manner that people don't want to come back.
You want to go, Scott? You have anything to say?
I do.
Go ahead, I'll let you go first.
Well, first of all, since Zach raised it, I would have to agree that it was the way they handled that meeting. He lost control of the audience pretty early on, I thought, and didn't seem to recognize that. And I think that you could tell, you could sense and see and hear the frustration building in the audience. And so, I think if we did something like that again, that a different format might be appropriate. Secondly, what I heard was a tremendous amount of frustration that was expressed in a variety of different ways. One common way was just make a decision, and another way was, why are you telling us all this history? We thought we were going to hear a proposal from council of what you wanted to do. That's why we elected you. And I heard several people say that during and after the meeting, and it's reflected in some of the written comments, all of which I've read. So I thought it was really interesting. I think if we do it again, we need to have a specific, we need to do it differently and have perhaps a different objective. But there seems to be a desire, from what I've heard of the public, a desire for council to start moving forward and establishing a direction on this that they can then react to, which I can understand, I guess. I will say, I read all the written comments that were submitted. I made a little spreadsheet to keep track of things. And so not all of the commenters gave their names and addresses. Several were anonymous. But of the ones that provided names and addresses, I gleaned that about 12 or maybe 13 with the comment that we were given tonight are actually city residents. More maybe, but they didn't indicate it. Of the city residents that I could identify that commented, it looks like the opinions about, not everyone expressed an opinion about the MAP site either, but it looked like a slight majority favored the MAP site, 6-4 is my count of city residents that I could identify in the commenters. Just for what that's worth. It's a tiny sample, but it's one of the reasons in my mind that we did this was to get this input and this feedback. So I'll stop there.
Is that from what was in the packet, so you're including?
Yeah, I went through everything that was in the packet, and then we were given another one tonight that was handwritten.
Oh, you mean Mr. Murphy's? Yeah, that was in your envelope, or in your
He's a
box.
city resident.
Yeah.
So, but I admit I might have missed one because I had 24 in my spreadsheet. This would make 25, but I thought I saw somewhere 26 sets of comments were submitted. So I don't know if the total count, the actual But I was curious. I mean, I wanted to know if most people favored or one option over the other.
Paul?
Well, I want to be kind to David, but I can't be. I've been to a lot of presentations of big items. That was one of the worst I've ever seen. You can't start out by saying, I know you can't see this, and expect people to react. He said that. And you don't go through and say, okay, here's when they got into the minutia of run times and try to give the numbers when people couldn't see them and anything in front of them, even use as a reference. It was really, really just not well done. And I would hope that he had done this before in a better manner, because it was just not good at all. And as has been stressed already, I'm not going to go through it. It was, we lost the people early. We said 40 minutes.
Yeah, but that was without people having questions too.
I know that.
That's not
And
fair
that
to
was
put that on
where
him.
we should have probably told David, don't take any questions, because it's going to, or we should have then given a longer time. But, that interrupted also part of his flow. And that wasn't good. I too went through, I didn't prepare a spreadsheet, but I did go through and looked at it, had discussion. We had an interesting forum meeting. Zach was there, talking about that. Some people from the city, some not, about the process there and what they got out of it. None of them were there at both, at the forum. At the meeting. And I guess my takeaway best of all is they want us to make a decision. And that's been expressed this evening. When we get further down, I think we are going to have some discussions about it. One consideration and one discussion about that, and that's probably good. It is good. I got some other thoughts, but right now you wanted to know what we thought about the meeting, and my feeling right now is with Zach, if we do another meeting, it's got to be totally different. Scott as well, it's got to be totally different. It can't be like that at all. And I don't want David anywhere around. Okay.
I will come to David's defense, because I think the quality of the presentation is on our shoulders. I don't think we gave him the clear direction that he needed to have.
I'll accept it.
I said that before you said it.
Everybody saw it ahead of time, and he didn't do it in a moment, so.
Scott had said early on that, you talked about the length that we originally were having when he said, 90 minutes, and you said, oh, that's way too long.
90 slots.
And we
Yeah,
took
then
it
we
out.
decided to
We have
cut it
them
to 40 minutes, and I thought 20 minutes would have been
Yeah.
more than enough, but it got out of hand, definitely.
I said the same thing before we ever went there, where I said,
Right.
I feel like we are asking David to figure out how we want to do this. We have not defined what we're
Right,
after.
exactly.
I agree with you, we didn't get it clear.
One thing I think we need to be more aware of is the setup. This is way too deep of a room to have the presentation on that wall and expect people to see it. I think we have a portable screen, put it here and put the audience out here.
I don't think we have a portable screen.
Put it on the wall.
Or you had a portable screen.
Or just move the audience up here, we could sit on the sides or something.
Well, we did sit fairly far. I mean, people chose to sit in the back, but I mean, we tried to set it up closer to this, but I don't know.
We'll learn from her.
I mean, I think part of the point was to have people at the boards, and a lot of the stuff that was in the presentation was at the board, but, right, so.
I don't think, I didn't see hardly anybody beforehand doing it, and when they did, they didn't know how to ask questions, okay? They didn't know what the questions to ask. Then when it got over, I saw a few people there, but
Maybe
honest, I was-
should have had them do the boards first.
I don't know, we should have had Jim, I just know it wasn't done.
I think there probably would have still been a great deal of confusion
Oh, yeah.
in the absence of clearly defined options. I mean, we had options that were, and I lost count of how many times he had to say, but we're no longer considering that, or something to that effect. You know, it was-
And then when the
And
questions,
that's not, again, not his fault.
and then the questions took him back and forth. So he was backing up
Yep.
to find stuff. And should have just taken a few questions and then moved on and say, we'll take more questions at the end.
All that said, I think it was a very worthwhile thing to do that. And like Julie said, I was extremely gratified to see the number of people that came out.
Yes.
On a really nice Saturday morning. I could have been doing a lot of other things.
One of the few
Right.
nice Saturday mornings.
Yeah, yeah. So it's always, I don't know, I always think it's nice to see people taking the time to come to meetings and participate in the process.
Done?
I'm suspecting that that kind of turnout, and those people leave the building and go back to their everyday, that would generate interest. And that if we were to have another meeting, and we would now know how to revamp the presentation and how to go for the kinds of things that we heard people, if you all have, if Zach has gotten a lot of questions from people, we could get those questions answered. I would be willing to do it again. Anything that we can get from our community that tells us, gives us direction, means something to you. But I don't want to leave the meeting.
You don't want to leave the meeting?
But I don't want to leave the meeting. Leave that to be a thankless job.
Well, I'm happy to lead the meeting if we know where we're going,
Mhm.
or what you want to ask.
Okay.
I didn't get any questions during my 8 slides.
From your what?
I didn't get any questions during my 8 slides.
They were just getting warmed up at that point.
How many people do we know attended the fire hall and the city offices?
Tour.
I only had 2, and, well, one,
You
I
had-
had 3. One was Scott Bell, and then one person from Webster Township, and one person from Dexter Township. So only one city
In the
resident,
offices there.
and that was Scott, yeah.
And
I don't know about the fire.
And there were,
I saw a few people at the fire station.
there were,
It wasn't
I think,
a lot.
I was there for a while, and I think there were 8 that I counted over, because some had left before you got there. I think there were 8. Julie was there.
Yeah.
I was there. Scott, there were 3 council people there.
I think there's more families that take their kids on a Saturday morning there than were stopped by during when we advertised it.
There definitely were. I don't think you were looking at facilities or anything. But yes, that's,
So if we were going to do another one, when would we want to try and do that?
So,
I'm just thinking out loud, time-wise.
Well, yeah, well, there's some interest out there.
Right.
Things are, people are talking.
What would be different in the next one, though? at this
Say it again?
point? I mean, what would be different in the next one at this point? What would-
well, there's item number 2 could be already completed.
Right, I'm just saying, if we're talking about having it, we don't even
Item number 3,
know.
we could have a discussion on which some of, we've already completed something, so there would be 2 things that we could say definitely have done. Because I agree, with people said that they want us to do something, it's been long enough. Make a decision. They want the right decision, but they also, in their mind, but they also want a decision.
Sorry.
No, you're okay, good.
When I have run into a few people who want us to make a decision, they also want to know, how much is it going to cost me? How much is it going to cost? And what's it going to, what does that mean? I say, make a decision. How much do you want to spend? And so I think that if there was a way to somehow get that information out so people could decide how much they want to pay, that would be helpful.
It was interesting at one point, I don't remember how it happened, but it became apparent that not everyone understood what a mill was. I was a little surprised by that. But, and you answered it perfectly, but.
Okay. I tried that.
Yeah, but I guess it just underscores the need not to assume that everybody knows even some of the basic concepts of that. Sorry, can you hear me? I was going to say, if we do this again, I would suggest that along the lines of what Don was just saying, we can say, look, there are really two options on the table for sites right now, since we just heard apparently Copeland's off the table.
And they have a price tag.
And here's what they cost. And then here are the construction costs. And even though those are uncertain, we can bound it with a range. There's a new fire station is going to cost between X and Y. The modeling the current facility is going to be between A and B. And that stuff is in here, but it's kind of buried. We need to strip everything else away and say, and then we will have to bond for this. There's no question. And this is what that's going to mean if it passes.
I think you're right.
Just,
With a chart, a decent chart you can read or whatever.
yeah, right, yeah.
This is how this works. Yeah.
Yeah. And,
I don't disagree. And we need it, but it's more than just money. There's a lot of other factors that enter into this decision besides just the dollar. And remember, there's a lot of people I talked to who thought, oh, that's a lot of money for one, and they forgot that there's going to be some money for two. They were comparing a lot to zero. That didn't happen. There's a lot compared to something. Okay.
right, I think that's a really good point. We have to do something.
Although if we wait long enough, we'll be able to buy self-driving fire trucks and circle around and
There we go.
triangulate it.
Okay, anybody have any other further thoughts on the follow-up from the meeting? Okay, we'll
Would
go
you
down
mind
to...
comment from staff?
Sure.
So one of the things that might be helpful, if you're not going to use David again, and I know, Sean, you said, you could, if you wanted, I'm not going to offer staff in this particular instance, I would suggest that we talk with Megan, who's done our master plan. She's done many facilitations for a range. Donna, you remember going?
I remember her.
She's very good. If nothing else, at least have her come and present to you what a format would look like and help you then structure. That would be my suggestion.
Thank you. Okay, move on to K2. Okay, thank you for the feedback and dialogue on that. Old business, item K2, which was an item postponed from the March 25th, 2019 meeting.
I move we approve the letter of intent with some changes to date, the dates in there to be discussed.
Dates to be discussed.
Yep.
Or do you have some dates to throw in, or do you just want to?
Well, if we get the second, it goes to discussion.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Zach, second by Paul. which is the motion to sign the letter of intent, right? Is that what-
Correct.
The basic motion is that?
Not to purchase the property, not to sign an agreement, but to sign this letter of intent with some changes to dates, obviously, since it's sat for 6 weeks, so that we can negotiate the purchase agreement.
Tell me once again, it's not a letter of intent? It is a letter.
It is a letter of intent to negotiate a purchase agreement, so it's not a purchase agreement, it's a letter of intent.
Okay.
What it basically,
You'd have to bring back the purchase agreement would have to come back.
correct. So this is basically signaling intent to the owner of the property. We're serious, we want to talk to you and sort out the terms. And so they kind of hit pause on showing the property. Is that close enough?
So what dates are you proposing to change that?
Well, obviously, May 14th, I think, is a bit early, since that's tomorrow. I would propose that we put that out at least to June 11th. That's a Tuesday after the first meeting in June. I think that's kind of fair. We've sat on it.
So in public interest, all 3 dates would be June 11th instead of May 14th?
The ones that are May 14th would change to that, yes.
Okay.
And then the other ones would be pushed back similarly by a month or so. Making sure that the last one would be beyond the November election day, which it's pretty close to right now.
Now, the date they have ballot language done for November is August 13th, and then the election date is, I think it's the 5th.
It does have the inspection period date of June 14th. Do you want to change that one as well?
Yeah, that would go till July.
Yep.
1 month.
So the first meeting after the election is the 11th of November.
So that one then would be to November 12th, the Tuesday after. That's my spaghetti on the wall, unless you had.
So November 8th goes to November 12th, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
How much do you lose with that?
Yeah, nothing until the purchase agreement comes back.
So let me just try and understand what we're doing again, so play this out in time. So if we were to do this with the dates you've got in there, you would expect to see the purchase agreement at the next meeting? Or when would you expect to see the purchase agreement? We have May 28th, which is the Tuesday after Memorial Day. Okay. And we have, practically speaking, our city manager out of town the entire week from Friday to before that.
That's too soon.
Well, when I talk about
I'm just
this,
trying to get mechanics now. Let's say we had the purchase agreement on the 28th, let's just say we got to that point. So then we would have according to, we changed the date of May 14th to June 11th under public interest, right? So we would have essentially 2 weeks or less than 2 weeks to determine if we want to continue to pursue, right? Is that what we have to do?
so can I make a comment?
As long as, yes.
When I talk about this with Scott, he said that, this is basically just his letter of intent, but all those dates and details would get worked out in the purchase agreement. So having them in here isn't as essential as what they would be in the purchase agreement, because the purchase agreement will officially establish the due diligence period and all of the drop dead dates. This was just kind of a sketch of the possibilities, so
As well
even
as
if they're
the
not completely dialed in, the purchase agreement would have what will become the official dates.
I could shoot for the purchase agreement by the first meeting in June. That
And then
way
just have the
that,
dates cascade from there.
that way we
Because-
get it maybe in our packet before.
Because if you had to do a phase one, I mean, that's gonna take, you know, probably a month or month and a half, the ASTI would need to do that, so.
And just to clarify, if this moves forward, the purchase agreement comes back before council.
Right, it sounds like the first meeting in June would be the goal. And then it would be, I think it's like 3 days after that, the $20,000 is due.
So we're not spending any money tonight.
So are we trying to have another public meeting before that purchase agreement comes back, or after?
It's pretty tight to set something up before then. Find the space.
Unless we kick it to second meeting in June.
We already made the determination we're gonna have a second meeting.
So if we were,
I'm just trying to understand how it fits in.
it'd be nice too, if we do have another meeting, is we can get to the library. Would be good.
Because then there's a farmer's market on the way there.
They just get really booked up fast, so, I mean, the sooner you want to have the meeting, the less likely the library will be available, just because it's the place to be.
Well, if we are going to have a second meeting.
Did we? Oh, go ahead. Say it.
No, just dramatic pause for effect. And also to allow me to think, is I think it would probably be most beneficial if it was the Saturday before it got onto our agenda. Because it's fresh, we don't have to remember what happened. The folks who are really interested will know, I get to sleep in a day, and then I'll come to the meeting the next time. So I guess if I had a magic wand, I would say shoot for the first meeting in June to have the purchase agreement back, with the hopes that we'll be able to find a room big enough that Saturday. I'm not sure how big scheduling is, but if we've determined we really want to have that public meeting before, then we can always postpone it.
So you may have the meeting on Saturday, June 8th, and then have the council meeting on Monday, June 10th?
Yep.
But, you know, thinking that you postpone it, that plays into the dates that you've established in the purchase agreement. Now you're cutting out 2 weeks of,
Yeah.
I would rather aim for the second meeting then, and have that be, you know, set up for that. I don't know what the dates are in
So
June.
the second meeting in June is June 24th.
Okay.
Gordon Hall Days is Saturday, June 20th. So that would probably eliminate a lot of people from participation. The other Saturday in June is the 15th.
Which is Father's Day weekend.
Long night day.
Do you think it would be unreasonable to get something for the first meeting in June? It sounds like,
What,
I don't think it's unreasonable for the purchase agreement, the first meeting in June. I'm just not sure about the public meeting for
what's the date of the first meeting?
June 10th.
Okay, so if we had June 8th is a Saturday,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
we could do a meeting on June 8th. Then we could discuss what took place in the meeting at the first meeting in June.
But then still do the purchase agreement potentially the 24th.
Yeah.
Which date are you talking about the meeting being on?
The public meeting is June 8th then.
On the 8th.
In the-
I don't have to do,
Yeah, I don't think I will either, but that's.
but I'm not saying don't have a meeting without me, but I just can't be here.
Me neither.
What's it, you can't be here now?
On the 8th of June,
Interesting.
the 15th would be okay. The 1st would be okay, but not the 8th.
And you realize that every time we have something from June on now, there's gonna be people missing.
It was hard enough in March and April. I mean, we wanted to have it in March, we pushed it to April.
I know.
I wish we would have had it in March, it was a lot less busy than April turned out to be.
Yep, so, that doesn't mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't have it, I'm just saying that more you have, more people be leaving, so I didn't get to it.
I mean, does it have to be on a Saturday?
Well, yeah, I mean,
That's the other thing.
Or June 1st.
people will also have council meetings as opportunities to provide input.
I mean, we could have a work session where we, at like 5 o'clock, where we invite people to come before a meeting, and do that, too. I mean, that was just the original idea, was to have a Saturday meeting and a during the week meeting, so it kind of fits in with that original plan.
Yeah, I would, if you're going to do that, I would probably do like a 6 to 7:30 work session, and then
Just our council.
7:30,
The work session would be the public session.
I mean, we could do that before the first meeting in June, and then vote on the purchase agreement the second meeting in June. And have a draft of it for the first meeting in June, but with the dates set up that it would be potentially adopted the second meeting in June.
I would, yeah, I think that makes sense. I
And
don't
then at
think it's
least
going to
we're
be terribly
using our
difficult
time
to
to-
draft the purchase agreement,
No,
because
I'm sure
Matt's
it's all
gonna be
just boilerplate
here with the
stuff.
terms, and the dates are going to be.
Well, in that case, then the first period would be June 25th, is my calendar still is correct.
Yeah, the meeting would be the 24th.
Okay, that's this week.
I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be at the June 10th meeting.
At what?
June 10th meeting.
Okay.
Just so, no, that's not, you guys can go ahead and do things if you need to do things. I have to be in Plymouth for a DDA meeting right now.
Well, the public meeting, I mean, it could be a different day of the week, doesn't necessarily have to be before council. so. Could be the 11th or 12th, or...
Do we need to set that date now? I guess is the
Well, the only
question.
issue is rooms and advertisements.
Right, so yeah, okay, so you want to be looking, my point is though, if you were to look at the different options and then come back to us with dates, you could do a doodle poll.
Yeah, I mean,
Any date we give you, if it's not available, you're gonna have to come out with another date, is my point. You could just, if the goal is to be in the first part of June,
we've got to figure out,
you can ask around for,
who do we need to be there? Does Dave need to be there? Is it something we can do ourselves?
I think we can do it ourselves.
That's what I'm-
Personal thing.
so would we set that then outside of the meeting and based on the doodle poll then, so we don't have to wait till the 28th? Or would we be
Yeah.
setting it the 28th
No,
and potentially have
here's
it
the
within 2
doodle poll.
weeks?
just a suggestion.
Do what?
Use technology so we can set a date instead of having to get the band together to set a date. So aside from,
Try.
it sounds like the dates are kind of settled now.
Mhm.
This is very important to me. I've got 4 sheets of plan and design issues with the current site. I'm not going to read them to you unless you really want it. I can share it with folks. These items at the remodeled and addition at the current site are either fatal flaws or really expensive things that haven't been accounted for. And this site is the best fit. It's not the perfect site. We want, yep,
We have a motion on the table.
yes.
We need to take care of that before.
Well, this is related to the motion.
That's why he supports the motion.
Discussion.
Yep. And, you know, our other option is either we buy property with stuff on it that's going to be more expensive and or require us to go through condemnation. And I don't want to kick people out of their house when there's a spot half a mile down the road from this building. So if anyone is interested on these, after the meeting, I went and spoke with someone, and they asked me to put down all my concerns in writing, because she was too smart to want to spend 2 hours with me doing them in an otherwise. It was a pretty good exercise, and it was far longer than what I had thought. Anyone who's interested in them, know that I've tried to understand everyone's concerns. I don't like change for change's sake. I still, at my mom's house, have my first car, a 1984 Renault Encore that my grandpa taught me to drive in when I was 12. It's got rust all over the thing. It's going to cost $60,000 to fix it and make it runnable. So I've tried my best to appreciate the cost and the attachment to that location. But that site won't work without significant additional money, and there's some spots that it just won't work in at all. So that's why I have been pushing and pushing to secure this spot so that we have that option. And I'm done, thank you.
So you could email that to us?
Yep. And so what I have found when I speak with folks, it usually is an hour and a half to 2 hours, even if they say it's just real quick, I have to go somewhere. Usually an hour and a half to 2 hours. Is there a couple topics we'll end up speaking about. One is site layout. Another is cost, and there are a couple different flavors for that. One is what does it cost me, what does it cost the city, how do these two compare, and the other one is response times, which is actually tricky. I can get 45 seconds faster in the fire truck time at a new modern station than at a remodeled station there. So you lose 2 minutes driving time, but you gain 45 seconds getting through the place out there. And so far, the one that I've been able to put down to paper is the site plan and site design stuff. I am working on the others. It's a real tough exercise just sitting by yourself trying to articulate it, but I will share those with everyone. Or rather, I'll share it with staff to distribute, so I'm not communicating with quorum outside of the meeting.
Thoughts from this side? Thoughts from this side? Anything? I'll say hands. Okay, so there's a motion on the table to sign a letter of intent to enter into a purchase agreement for the purchase of property located on Dexter Road at Meadowview. Ms. Jones, please call the vote.
Cousins,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Knight,
Yes.
Michelle's,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Keo.
No. Okay, motion carries 6-1. New business item K3, discussion of future use of 8140 Main Street property with review of previous council action.
Can I start that discussion, if possible? That was one that we put together on the agenda.
Absolutely, yep.
Okay.
Yep, that's fine.
A week ago today, I called Courtney and asked her if there had been discussion of having a workshop today. And she said, no, they thought we could just discuss it in the meeting, which we are doing. I told her that with the discussion of previous motions, which I'll speak to in a moment here, that I thought it'd be behoove us, that if there's anybody has any doubt that there was been previous votes on 8140, that we would not use that at a fire hall, that we could eliminate that by having that vote tonight. She said to me, just I'll put a marker, placemaker marker in there for the meeting, just get it to me tomorrow morning. So I went back through my materials that I had, trying to get the exact wording that we had for the previous meetings, and I couldn't find it. So the next morning I called Jim and asked him, since I was at the hospital with my wife all week last week with her chemo, and I asked her if I could, he would look up that motion and send it to Courtney, which he did. And is that, are all those correct? Everything I said correct, thank you. So.
Yeah, I wanted you to provide me the wording for the agenda.
Yes, right. So I wanted the wording we had previously, and so she didn't want me just to tell her, she wanted black and white, which I understood. It's fine. The way it should be done. So then when I got the agenda, I saw this item here that I had not talked to the mayor. To be quite honest, it didn't even occur to me to do that. Maybe because of who was sending it and who's not sending it, that's beside the point. So I was going to ask originally just to have this taken off the agenda. I don't know, we haven't had this discussion. So I guess the question is that I ask tonight as we start this discussion is when is a vote for this council a legal action to actually take effect? And I believe that whether it was on the agenda or not on the agenda has nothing to do with the vote when it comes out. Now, you may not like it, but the fact of the matter is that the vote has been placed before this body twice, and it was voted to not go to 8140 twice. I wanted to make sure that that was done the third time if nobody got the message. And so that's why I asked to have it on the agenda. And I will probably then ask to place it on the agenda at the next meeting if we don't take it up tonight. So that was my point. I don't know how you can just dismiss a vote. A vote is a vote. We made an oath of office when we all took this oath that we would abide by the state of Michigan and the laws thereof. And we took a 4-3 vote not to go 8140. I've had people say to me, why are you even discussing 8140? You've already taken it off the table. You voted twice to do that. Who doesn't get the message? And the answer is, I don't know. I guess we're nice people and we decide we're just going to try to go along with it. So I guess the question I have tonight, when is a legal vote a legal vote? And have we not only already had one, but 2 legal votes to not go to 8140? If you have another way that we tell me we don't do that, didn't do that, I'll be glad to listen to that. But at this point in time, we have taken 2 legal votes by our rules, by the rules of the state of Michigan, laws of the state of Michigan, that we are not going to go to 8140 for a fire hall. So why are we discussing it?
So which 2 are you referring to?
I'm referring to one that we was on November, Mr. Smith, maybe you have me out there, November 28th, 2016, correct?
Yes.
And the vote on
April 9th.
April the 9th of 2018, correct?
Okay, so the first one was a 5-2 vote.
Correct.
Okay, and did we provide a recommendation no later than February 27th?
Say it again.
The first motion was on November 28th. You're right.
Correct. And you're quite right.
And was there a recommendation provided by February 27th?
I don't know that. I don't have that in front of me.
Okay. All right, well, I don't know if it was or it wasn't, from what's here, but that was part of the motion that was made on that day. And then subsequently in July of 2017, there was another motion made. Right? I mean, there were a lot of things done. I mean, with people voting for and against in different ways all across this. I mean, I don't know what you're driving at. I think that what was expressed, what I heard at the town hall meeting is that everybody didn't appreciate that it wasn't on the agenda, regardless of how legal you're arguing the vote is or not, that the common courtesy in the community is that we should have that thing on the agenda where they have a chance to know about it.
And that's what I tried to do tonight. Okay?
I'll be nerdy parliamentarian here. Rule number 11 of our adopted rules, reconsideration of question. When a question has been taken or a vote decided, it shall be in order for any member voting with the prevailing side to move a reconsideration thereof at the same or next regular meeting, but no question shall be considered a third time.
And John, I heard one person say that. I didn't hear any more than that. Now, maybe I didn't have my ears on last 2-3 weeks ago, but I only heard one person say that, okay? The person in the front row, there may have been others, I just heard one, but were there others that said that?
I thought it
Especially
was,
at that meeting?
I thought it was Pete and Natalie,
And I heard other people.
but I didn't. And then there was,
I don't know who that
as
is.
with most of the questions, when somebody asked the questions, the audience got a little noisy, so it's hard to tell
That's right.
if others were agreeing with that or not agreeing with that.
Irregardless of that, feeling from them, the vote was still a legal vote.
Right, but that doesn't preclude us from doing anything else, or doing other things.
No, I didn't say that.
I mean, if somebody wanted to discuss adding a decontamination bay, they could do that. If somebody wanted to discuss modernizing the bunk room, they could do that. It has nothing to do with the motion of building a fire station somewhere else. It's not anti-building a fire station somewhere else. You could improve the current fire station in many ways, which is the practical reality that I think many of our citizens get, and still have your long-term vision be to build the fire station on another property. Doesn't mean that you couldn't improve the atmosphere or the environment for the firefighters today. It all depends on what you're trying to accomplish. That being something extensive or elaborate versus that being simple upgrades, which is what this started on 10 years ago, when we were looking at even having more than one use at the site. But the data changes. The data's changed throughout all of this. It changed when our chief got here. I mean, we picked on our architect, but he's put in a tough spot. The program that he was asked to evaluate is changed in the 3 years since he finished his scope of work. And the size and the requirements and the wants at the staff for a new station are much more elaborate than in 14, 15 when he did his study. But there's been nothing done to suggest that the votes that were taken aren't legal. There's no common courtesy in any of them, in my opinion. And it doesn't, you know, even if we voted to have city offices, you know, be at 3045 Broad, it doesn't mean that somebody couldn't make a motion to get new chairs for our office equipment at the current site. So I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I don't understand what your point is. I mean,
Well, there's a difference between chairs or a site.
well, not necessarily, not if the
Well,
point is.
yes, there is. And in people's minds, there's a lot of difference, okay? Fact of the matter is, most people here, when they were here last Saturday, they knew, pretty much all of them knew, there were 2 sites we were considering. Maybe 3 when they brought Copeland. But there wasn't anything other than that. We did dismiss, by David's process, a lot, and short of it, okay? But it came down to 2, and everybody knew that. They even expressed it at the end.
Ms. Knight?
I see that, and looking through all this, on August 24th of 2009, there was a motion by Smith, supported by Fisher, to designate 8140 Main Street as the future site for the Village of Dexter offices. If we need to get that back on the agenda next time to reiterate that again for a vote, let's do it. I mean, that's what we're looking for, is a vote on what to do with 8140. And I've said all along, I'm definitely in favor of 8140, renovating that for city offices. So I'm willing to hopefully get it on the agenda next month and take action again.
Ms. Fisher?
Have we ever tested what one council can bind, how one council can bind another council? We come and we go. People run, people don't choose not to run. And also, what is to keep a person from getting additional information and saying, I don't feel that way anymore. That's not, I don't think that that was a good decision on my part. Is there anything that tests that we can or we cannot?
The thing that keeps from getting more information is a majority vote,
Absolutely.
whether we like it or not.
That's right.
So,
But if the subject comes up and you voted this way, but there's discussion at the table and there's new information, you are bound to that original decision, you're saying?
Until you change it.
Unless
Well-
you reconsider it or, you
yeah,
know.
so,
Unless it's an official motion.
No, that's what I'm saying, if there's another motion,
Right.
yeah, okay.
so, again, I'll get a little bit nerdy. Now, we've got a clerk over there, I see, who's been to a couple of
Squirming in
parliamentary
the
stuff.
seat.
So at the state level and congressional level, there's the concept written into their rules that current legislature cannot bind future legislature. So after a session has finished, the next one can do whatever the heck they want in opposition to whatever. Our rules don't really acknowledge it. They're pretty much straight up Robert Rules of Order, that if you've decided something, someone who vote on the winning side can reconsider it within a very limited window. So at that meeting or the next meeting, someone who voted not to do the fire station there could have said, hey, I want to reconsider this and open it back up and have discussion. And so I guess the one thing that's been percolating in the back of my mind is that's a really tight window. And if our clerk still has contact with Ms. Coco, that it might be a good question to put to her. For those who don't know, she's a parliamentary guru in the state of Michigan, and I would love to have her for training for all of our bodies. And see if there might be ways we can clarify that so that future bodies aren't bound if everyone has died in a bus accident or something.
But you do admit that building a new fire station and renovating an existing one are 2 different things. Right? I mean, those are 2 different things.
Perhaps, but
The-
the phrasing here is that location no longer be considered as a site for a future fire station. Not a new fire station or remodel, just no fire station there in the future. So yeah, depending on the phrasing, there's ways
That's
to
the first
parse it.
motion?
Yep, the one from 2016.
Okay, so does the second one take the place of the first one?
Well,
Since it was a new body and whatever?
that's where our rules don't seem to acknowledge the different section has, after each election, the reset button gets hit. So I would make a strong argument that the rules that we had in place at the time means that this second vote wasn't valid.
And which vote is that, the date?
The one on 4/9/2018.
Well, I still think that you could be voting to do renovations even though you were thinking that there was a different site for a new. I don't see those as in conflict at all. One has a little longer view maybe, if that's what you're looking for.
Well, I mean, these two motions were kind of the opposite. One was saying what you didn't want at 8140, and the other one in 2018 was to specifically say, build a fire station at a new site.
I remember that night quite well, and I remember that by voting for that, what was in my head was, we have property on Dan Hoy Road, and we keep back and forth, and so if we rule this out, then we'll get going on that project. That's what I remember, my thoughts.
Okay, do we have any further discussion on this? We have a pedestrian safety topic to cover, the Central Street project to cover, and we have to set our public hearing for our millage yet, under new business, and we have our engineers waiting in the audience.
All right, before we leave it though, Paul had asked whether this could be on the agenda for,
Did he ask that question?
I did earlier, somebody did. I thought when he first started,
It can be.
he had asked for it.
And what did he ask for?
To have it be a consideration item for the next meeting.
Which thing?
Number 3.
Is that two separate things, one for what Julie asked for and one for what Paul asked for, or one thing
Yeah,
together?
I mean, whatever you need to have on the agenda, just get it to Courtney and let me know before the deadline.
You two will have to figure out whether they're separate or together.
So for the student representatives, Model UN, it pays off. Plus you get day off school.
Okay, let's move on to new business.
Okay, new business item L1, discussion of pedestrian safety project. Courtney, I'll turn this over to you.
So the memo that you have is an update of the one I've been providing that shows the status of the various projects. OHM is here because they finished some of the drafts of the walking maps and a memo regarding some of their findings to get feedback on. We also included the design of the forestry sidewalk, which is being finalized, I believe, this week, so that's ready to go to bid. The comments that we received are in there. Most of them really were from south side of the street residents. So and the notes from the walkthrough on there, nothing changed significantly based on the pedestrian walkthrough or the walkthrough with the residents. So I don't know if people have questions on the memo or how you exactly want to do it. I mean, I think part of the concern, especially given the next item, is that if we're serious about doing something, we need to do that and probably have it out to bid in very early June so that it can be done before school. So I think we're all kind of aligned with wanting to do the sidewalk on Forest. That's sort of the easy one at this point, who would have thought. So then that other thing I think is kind of getting to being agreed upon are the 2 rapid flashing beacons on Dan Hoy. We may have a little bit of a location issue, but we're kind of getting there. So the real outstanding
So
question.
when you say we're getting it, that's school and us, or just us?
We're gonna meet with the schools likely next week on it, but they were supportive of those,
Okay.
so
Okay.
that's not gonna be an issue. So then that kind of brings us down to the area of the Ann Arbor Street and the Baker Road crossing and what to do with those two, because there's like I said, a cost factor. So putting in pedestrian activated beacons is like $100,000 at an intersection. The rapid flashing beacons closer to 40. So the likelihood of us actually being able to install the pedestrian activated beacons is just much different than the rapid flashing beacons. So that's kind of the conversation that we wanted to kick off, because we need to start like narrowing this down into what we're literally going to be able to do. And based on this conversation today, we're going to schedule a meeting with the schools because we need to go over all of this with them. They did get a draft of it, of what was in the packet last week when we met with them. So Steve Deering is here, Patrick is here. I don't know if you guys have questions on the memo or a place that, anything that you read that you want to talk about further.
Zach, over for you.
I'm very happy to see the inclusion of the Hawks instead of the RFBs, rapid flashing beacons for Baker and Ann Arbor. Every week or two, I've gone down to the one that's next to Grandview Commons, and the first car never ever stops. And I think...
But the cars do stop though. The first one might not. See, my concern, Zach, honest to God, is that we cannot afford to do the pedestrian activated beacons.
Well,
So how do we?
We don't have to do
So
them
are we gonna
all
do
the same
nothing?
year.
And then we're doing nothing for another, 3, 4, I mean, you see the state of the fund, so. And the schools are concerned that it's too confusing to have multiple different things in the community that the kids have to be trained to use. Those are kind of some of the concerns that I've heard so far.
Well, my first time using it, 7 cars passed before one car stopped. The first car was a bit close to the thing. It wasn't in heavy rush hours at the beginning of rush hour. And by the time I got halfway to the first lane, the blinking stopped.
Right, and that can be adjusted.
The most recent time, there were 3 cars that went through before one stopped. And this time, I gave them lots of space. I understand that they're more costly, but they also will have a better impact, I believe, and I think it's worth doing that.
Hawkman, isn't it?
Yep. So the difference from the rapid flashing beacons, that's one we've got across from Lug and Bob. And the Hawks are similar to in Ann Arbor on Jackson Road, YMCA. However, the one at the YMCA is put in a really dumb spot. You don't put it right at the intersection because it confuses drivers as they're turning. You do it mid-block where there's no turning actions, where it's cars coming this way and that way, which is what the plans show here.
Do you want to explain your report?
I think, yeah, a little bit of maybe a quick look back, and then, as Courtney mentioned, Steve's here as well, and kind of talk through some of the detailed items. So I guess relative to what we've done over the last few months, let's call back in the winter time frame, and maybe go back a little bit further. Coming to this point, we're really looking at a combination of some of the work that we've done, but then building on the work that Dexter Community Schools did relative to their improvements around town, and some of their work to analyze some of these crossings a little further, that were originally based on the Safe Routes to School work that was done 2013, 2012 timeframe. And so what Steve has done here is kind of taken that information, taken the walking route map, which you see in the document, which really is a routing, and Steve can add to this, a routing of pretty much every residential parcel to the school campus to show how that would happen within a 1.5 mile radius. And that is basically used to kind of determine where these key crossings would be, either at existing signals or at new infrastructure. So Steve and his group looked at that. But then they also gave a little bit greater detail at a few of the intersections that are called out specific on Baker. We obviously have a pedestrian refuge island in place now. The analysis of that was done based on the DCS information and then also some of their projections about changes to how much they might route students. And then we looked at Ann Arbor Street as well. Steve, I don't know if you want to maybe talk about, probably the biggest change, as Courtney mentioned, was the inclusion of these the pedestrian beacons that we were not showing in the original pass, but based on the additional information provided by the schools and Steve's analysis, he kind of came to a little bit different conclusion.
Yeah. The original report that had been done by the school district used a reputable traffic engineer, Jim Valenta. I know him very well. Been familiar with his work for decades, literally. But even with that first report, I was very hesitant about his recommendations of using a rapid flash beacon for crossings of either Baker or Ann Arbor streets. And primarily because the analysis that he had done showed that there was a lot of traffic on both of those roads. The traffic was heavy enough during the especially arrival times of the schools, as well as the dismissal time, that there were very few gaps in the traffic. And safely, a gap that's of a safe duration is extraordinarily important when it comes to crossing school-age pedestrians. And both of those roads basically didn't have enough gaps. That's the long and the short of it. So his recommendation for a rapid flash beacon was such that, well, it's certainly better than any kind of static control. But I was, from the very beginning, questioning whether that was in fact sufficient. We started on the exercise working to put together the walking route maps, looking at routing everybody into the school campus, and then, okay, logically, how much adverse travel can you expect from school-age children? It's very difficult to get adults to walk past something to come back to. So that was a consideration and a factor based on our experience. And then it kept focusing down to the point of, okay, obviously, if it's convenient, the routing takes them to a traffic signal. Of course, we're going to want to use those. Those provide the most positive control of drivers. But there are likely going to be a couple locations, one on Baker, one on Ann Arbor Street, where we would need to cross students away from traffic signals. Okay, where are those locations? What are the characteristics of the locations? And what would be, in fact, the best control? Now, I'm aware of a lot of research that's been done, not a lot in Michigan, but certainly around the country, on the relative driver reactions when it comes to something like the hybrid pedestrian signals, or HAWKs, versus the rapid flash beacons. And the research is pretty positive that both help, but HAWKs are superior in heavy traffic flows where you otherwise don't have adequate gaps. And it's an inherent feature of both of those systems. The rapid flash beacons are advisory. They have, under normal circumstances, no legal compulsion for drivers to stop for them until a pedestrian actually enters the crosswalk. On the other hand, HAWK signals are a control of traffic, and when they go red, cars are expected to stop and to hold their stop until the peds have completed their crossing. So it's, in my judgment, the safest possible outcome given the nature of the campus, the way the walking routes can indeed concentrate a sufficient number of pedestrians to make it worthwhile to identify singularly discrete crossing points, and then protect those crossing points in the need to cross students against heavy flows with otherwise inadequate gaps. So that's kind of the reasoning that went behind all of this. In terms of the location chosen for Ann Arbor Street, the stipulations on the use of hawks, you're not really supposed to put them at signalized intersections, you're not supposed to put them at intersections. And so I looked for and found a mid-block location that seemed suitable. And what was nice about this mid-block location is that if you think of the two intersections on either side, Inverness and Kensington, both of them are on that plateau of Ann Arbor Street, but both of those intersections in either the northbound or southbound direction also have a significant grade up or down to that intersection. So it's like you're cresting the hill, and then there's the intersection with the existing head crossings denoted. This gets away from that cresting the hill kind of phenomena and gets the crossing truly on the flat with really good sight distances for traffic on Ann Arbor Street approaching either direction. Baker Road, we already have a location that the city's invested a significant amount of money to make improvements. It's been set up to have a refuge island. It's the added benefit, especially since there's a lot of concerns about how any kind of a pedestrian crossing might have an interaction with the roundabouts that have been put in on Baker to the south at Dan Hoy and on Shield Roads. It is sufficiently removed from that roundabout that we don't have to worry about traffic from the roundabout backing up northwards toward the ped crossing, or if the hawk signal goes in, traffic stopped at a hawk backing up down into the roundabout. Both of those things are not likely going to occur because the existing location of that crossing. So those were how I then, what's the correct tool to use, and then where should that tool be deployed to make it as safe as possible for the students to be able to get to and from their homes and schools. And then beyond that, we noted that as we were working up the routing maps, Dexter Schools is a little unusual. They have this central campus of schools, but when you think about Creekside and the 1.5 mile restriction, which is supposed to be door to door, there's going to be portions of the neighborhoods to the east of Ann Arbor Street that are going to be beyond the 1.5 miles. And then, of course, there's that portion of the city that lies to the north of the railroad tracks, where a very small portion of that subdivision is just within walking distance, but the majority of the subdivision is not. So those represent discussions that need to be taken up with the school district in terms of how they anticipate needing to finesse that issue of who's going to ride a bus in a neighborhood that mostly will be walking. We're dealing with the stuff to the east of Ann Arbor Street versus who's going to be riding a bus when it's a majority, but not necessarily the entirety of the neighborhood that lies north of the railroad tracks.
So we did confirm with the schools that they're not talking about not busing in the city. They're going to continue to bus. It's just that they'll, instead of discouraging walking, they will encourage it. So it's not an issue of them stopping the busing in the 1.5 mile radius. It's just an issue that they'll stop discouraging people. The one thing they would stop doing if they agree with our improvements is busing kids from the bus hub to Creekside. they would walk across Baker. But that's an issue because where that island is located is not really the best place for that to occur. They'd have to walk down and come back, which, as we said, I mean, can be challenging to get people to do. But that was the only thing that they would consider actually stopping, would be that bus.
Couldn't you get them to at that end door?
Say it again, Doc?
I guess, I mean, it
seems
was
to
just
me like
something we
if
talked
that were
about.
there and functional, they could go in the end door instead of walking all the way back up to the main entrance
Right.
of the old high school down where the library was. They could just go in the end, down 100 Hall.
You know, I actually used the mapping feature of Google Earth, and I figured it's about a little over 400-foot difference, additional distance to keep the crossing where it is today versus the location that they were desiring, which is actually rather close to the roundabout.
So you're proposing 2 halls, one on Baker,
One on
or
Baker,
Dexter and Arrow?
one on Airwood, yes.
So, it's been some time since we've talked about this, but I thought that we were going to adopt crosswalk standards before we did anything, and then the treatment would follow the standard,
We talked about that.
right? As opposed to, okay, we're gonna do this and then we'll back into the standards. So
So what, in reality, what is that going to do different than what?
Well, I guess I'd like to understand, you know, just what criteria we've decided we're going to be applying, so that if we have to apply it magically at Central, or some other road that comes into play. I mean, we were using the walking maps to, I thought, steer people towards where we wanted to designate official school crossings. Okay, and you know, in some cases, the argument was made along the way by either schools or maybe by OHM, that, you know, people want to take the shortest route. Right, I mean, that's the argument. I mean, we
2 points.
We
Learned that early on in life.
we suggested that, you know, like for example, that I think something that's influenced the Hawk here, and I'm not sure if you said it or not, is that there's 2 instances that we now know, which we didn't know in the report that they presented, or prior to. They want to have large groups of people cross the street regularly. Steve, if I'm wrong, one on Ann Arbor Street, they want to walk the kids from Wiley or from Bus Hub / Wiley up to the daycares that are across the street. So they want to go straight up Kensington. You know, there's a group, I can't remember the number that they said, 30?
That's the one at the
wrong.
daycare center?
Since they're not busing anymore.
They're no longer
They're not
busing
busing.
from Wiley to the daycare. So that they want to walk a group of people
Gotcha, I understand.
across Kensington to Morningstar and to now potentially the other one, or whatever.
Gotcha, okay.
The second group of people is that they'd like to not bus from the bus hub across to Creekside. They'd like to let people flow from Creekside across, and that number was significantly more. I can't remember what the numbers are off the top of my head anymore. But there were 2, as opposed to single walkers or smaller group numbers of people, they were going to pass groups. And I think that has played big into the recommendation of the Hawks in the 2 locations. Now ironically, the mid-block crossing that's being proposed is not creating shorter distance. If it's put between Kensington and Inverness, it is lengthening the distance that they have to walk. I think we need to discuss some things. You know, there are residents that live on the south side there. There's driveways. Are we going to change the modification of Dexter Arbor Road to have bump outs so that the crossing distance that they cross is the shortest? Because then you would have your red timing less, which has an impact on traffic. less. You know, but if you do that, you know, you gotta think about drainage, you gotta think about curb modifications, effect on driveways, taking out parking. There's a lot to these locations, but I was thinking I was thinking that in order of doing this, we would agree on the map, which was gonna be, and then agree on some standards. And then the third would be the improvements, whatever they might be, based upon the standards.
Well, the one on Baker Road,
But
it's not just getting kids to the bus hub. You were standing there, and I've been involved at least 3 different times now in the event in which the monstrous size of the track team at Mill Creek comes across that street to go to the track. And the number I heard was 150 kids. It's gigantic, and they come across the road there to go to that space. So they don't come down to the where the crosswalk is. I mean, they just walk across when they finally get an adult out there to stop the traffic for them to go. So tell me the difference between the cost of a Hawk and a $60,000.
Difference.
Each.
Ish.
So there's 120 at least. So
That's what.
can I continue with just one question about Hawks, or do you want to?
Sure, no, go ahead. Okay, yep, listening.
I go through Ann Arbor quite often, and I'm always amazed at the one there by the YMCA, okay? I see it all the time. I see people there all the time. There's another one they have over on Plymouth Road, which I think they put in there after a student was killed over there, and I haven't been to that one, except by it one time, and nobody was there.
Late at night before the incident.
So, the problem I have with the Hawk, it's not the initial stop. When it flashes, I get it. Other people get it, okay? You press the button, they walk across. The problem is afterwards. After they have gone, after the pedestrians have left the area, they are sometimes halfway down the block before their other red lights stop flashing. And those red lights flash all the time until they finally shut off. I don't know what the timing is there, but it backs up traffic a long ways there, and people get very impatient. Now, maybe it's because it's at that intersection, I don't know that, but the point is that it doesn't seem to me that they're timed right there to stop the traffic, let the pedestrian come off, and then start the traffic back up.
Okay.
Be the expert and enlighten me on that.
A lot of people don't know how to drive Hawk signals yet. So let me tell you the way it's supposed to work.
Okay.
And what's considered legal for drivers to do. A Hawk signal dwells black. You don't see any lights at all. A pedestrian walks up, there's a push button, they push the button, and the first thing the Hawk signal does is it kind of wakes up. And the way it wakes up is that it starts flashing yellow for a relatively short time. Then it goes to a solid yellow. And that's the yellow is the lowest lens on the assembly.
Okay, yep, got it.
And then there are 2 red signals on top of that, slightly to either side of the yellow. And the reds come on as a solid red. When they come on as a solid red, that's when the pedestrian sees the walk signal for the pedestrian signal side.
And he's looking at straight across the street.
Yep.
Got you.
And all the installations today are supposed to have the countdown part of that. So when it's no longer a walk and it starts flashing, don't walk, which is like the pedestrian's equivalent of if you're in the road, finish, get out of the road. If you haven't started, you shouldn't. All that time it's in walk mode, and for part of for all of the countdown, it's solid red. Then, because human behavior is such that if one pedestrian pushed that button, but it's a larger crowd, the signal assumes that there still might be others coming, but maybe not. And that's when it goes to a flashing red. And with a flashing red, if there are no pedestrians in the crossing, drivers are allowed to go. It's just like if it was the middle of the night and a signal is no longer working in stop and go mode, and it's in a flash operation, and you come up on a side street and it's flashing red. You're supposed to look, make sure there's no conflicts, and then you can proceed. Most people don't recognize that the flashing red allows them to proceed if there are no longer any pedestrians using the crosswalk. And that's why you see people backing up until it goes black again and turns itself completely back off. You know, Ann Arbor was not the first, but among the first in Michigan to use hawk signals. And unfortunately, they didn't really make hardly any effort at all to get out any kind of a driver education on what it is and how you're supposed to react to it. Solid red, drivers are exposed to stop and remain at a standstill. But once it goes to flashing red, they're supposed to exercise their judgment to see if there's still a pedestrian using the crosswalk. And if not, then they can proceed.
When I went to the crosswalk meeting that we had at the county with the road commissioner in Ann Arbor and Pittsfield and a lot of different organizations, most of them seem to be leaning away from hawks into the pedestrian activated beacons, which is basically like a traffic light that a pedestrian activates. So it's red, yellow, it's green all the time unless a pedestrian hits it and then it goes red, yellow, yellow, red, whatever, like a regular signal, because they feel like the hawks have confusion associated with them.
They do.
So I think it's Pittsfield, and I want to say the road commission, I think it was Pittsfield for sure that said that, they're not using, they're going towards the, I think they called it pedestrian activated something.
And what's the difference in the cost in that?
I don't even know.
When you go to a full-blown traffic signal?
That's just like putting up the signal that we
If you
just.
press the button and it stops.
No, once you
It's
go
still just a
to
signal.
a complete three-color head traffic signal, you start at about 180,000 and you can go up from there. By the way, I understand that there's some, especially townships, although they're not road agencies, almost as though they don't even count. But traffic signals, even if they're going to be pedestrian activated, they still have to meet the criteria in the Michigan Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, and that's a state law. So if you don't meet the criteria, you can't put a signal in, no matter how bad you might want it for pedestrians.
And these are mostly like Carpenter Road, like 3-4 lane roads. I mean, that's where, even like the one that's in Ann Arbor, I mean, that's a higher speed 4-lane road. And, we're not talking about those same things here, so
Well,
that's why
I recognize
struggle with
that,
it
but
more.
there are criteria, and for example, if you want to use the pedestrian warrant for a traffic signal, it starts at 150 pedestrians an hour, and you have to have it at least 4 hours where you have that kind of volume in conjunction with heavy traffic volumes, motorist volumes. But different discussion. I understand that, and the corollary to that is that a lot of other areas of the state that have actually tried rapid flash beacons are trying to get away from them because they don't have that mandate on drivers that they have to stop.
I get that.
So,
My question was between 3 different options, okay? Hawk, rapid flashing, and the pedestrian activated that stops. Thank you. So I don't have any problem with what you want to talk about, by the way, about setting standards and then.
My question was going to be, I'm assuming these recommendations are consistent with the draft standards.
Maybe I can touch on that. So back when we did kind of the PowerPoint on the wall here with kind of the rundown of if we were to apply the Ann Arbor standards in Dexter, based on the data we have, what would kind of the recommendations be? We kind of did that using the data we had and really just taking those standards and applying it. What I think we kind of give some context to this here is that this is taking that, but then building on it with additional information. I think what the Ann Arbor standard is kind of set up for is if you're going to apply over a citywide network, what would that, kind of that first pass be? But because we have additional information here that was provided by the schools, Steve was pretty adamant to point out that if it's showing you that you do need something above and beyond what kind of that first pass shows, then it's right to honor that. And that's kind of just basically saying that, when we look at the data, using the basic matrix, these are recommendations. But because we had additional data, that's why I think it basically took kind of the Baker and Ann Arbor Street up a notch than what we had originally proposed, saying an RFB would be appropriate. I think Steve mentioned the gap data is really the game changer in that.
But even if you just look at the Ann Arbor as a baseline for your policy, if you'll remember, they have kind of 3 categories of kind of standard crossing treatments, an enhanced, what do they call it, enhanced plus? And if you look at the enhanced plus, depending on the classification of the roadway, PHBs, or pedestrian hybrid beacons, which is what a hawk is, it's in there. And it pretty much applies to arterial type roadways. And there's no question at all that Baker Road and Ann Arbor Streets are arterial type roadways. As a corollary, if you look at our recommendations, because there's gaps in the sidewalk along Dan Hoey, there's going to have to be 2 separate crossings of Dan Hoey to get students that live on the south side crossed into the campus area. Dan Hoey is not an arterial, it functions more like a collector road. Volumes are lower, tends to have more gaps, and in that kind of a application, and again, keeping with the policy, a rectangular rapid flash beacon would actually be a good application in those 2 locations. So it's not, I don't believe you've adopted as a formal policy yet, but our recommendations were cognate of at least the draft that I remember seeing, and we believe it's in fact consistent with it.
So what about frequency of them? We don't have a map in our folder that shows the distance, but like, are we going to end up with one between Hudson and Edison?
Hudson.
No,
We
the
didn't
width
see
mapping,
volumes. We have the traffic count down of pedestrians at Hudson, and she didn't even see any in the morning commute, so it would be unlikely to get to a pedestrian level of
The other thing we could add too is, remember, going from that enhanced to enhanced plus, it typically involved if you were adjacent to a school or on a walking route, we'd only have 1 crossing of Ann Arbor Street, so that would kind of limit.
But let's talk about what that means though. 1 advertised crossing, you're not going to take out the crosswalks that are there.
no, they'd be used for general
Use.
General
Just like
use.
they are today.
It just wouldn't be the school route.
They just would not be the school route.
So
The only one up there, Sean, I could see an issue with, and we just said they've got to figure it out, is that the senior center, the bus route, is on the bus stop is on the opposite side of the senior center. But they have to go to the corner before they cross. I mean, they shouldn't be just crossing the middle of the street. So they have to do that right now.
And there's no
I think the sign's at the corner, right?
Excuse me?
Yeah,
Bus
it's close
pickup's
to
at
the
the
corner. But you're right, it's on the other side of the street from the senior center.
Yeah.
The way the vehicle code works is that pedestrians are allowed to cross at any intersection, whether it's marked for their use or not. They're allowed to cross at any intersection, whether there are ramps or not. And if you don't want them crossing at an intersection, you have to issue a traffic control order and explicitly prohibit them from crossing at that location and direct them to where you do want them to cross. So that's the way the vehicle code reads.
No jaywalking here, Bill. Figure it out. Go to crosswalk. No jaywalking.
No, I'd never do that.
So are we looking at solar powered ones?
There's
Are we looking?
power readily available at both locations. I mean, if you wanted to do solar, you could, but
I'm just asking.
power's right there. So if you wanted to tie it into to Edison, that's fine too. Either way.
Like I said, so I'm jumping the gun. I mean, in my mind, you know, we're seeing well, Courtney and I were with the school superintendent and finance director last Wednesday when we were talking about Mill Creek Park Phase 2. So we gave them a copy to make sure they knew this was in our packet, because we're making sure we're sharing the information. We've not yet had a formal meeting to actually discuss it, or, you know, we didn't want to preclude the fact that this body is the one that authorized the work and asked for the work and may have some comments that either change it or accept it or whatever. But I think that on the 28th, if we're good with the walking map, we should be accepting the walking map. And assuming the schools are good with the crosswalk locations, at some point we should be designating the locations of the crosswalk. You know, so before we authorize somebody to finish up the design. That make sense to everybody? I mean, there's sort of we're trying to get on the same page with the schools here, right?
There's a gap somewhere.
One thing to consider, though, if that's where you're going to go with it, is that the walking maps that I'm looking at have symbols on for the signals that are recommended.
Right.
So if we accept those maps, is that implicitly accepting the signal recommendations? So we need to be careful. I mean, no, I'm inferring what the symbols mean, there's no legend.
Scott, I guess I'm assuming, I'm assuming that I would actually like to adopt the standards first.
I recognize that.
Okay. I think accepting the maps, you probably should add the key to the key, what the symbols actually mean. But, I mean, you're not gonna have people cross at a mid-block in the middle of Kensington unless there's a signal there. So I think, yeah, you're accepting the maps, understanding that there would be an ultimate.
Yeah, no, I'm not questioning the crossings or the need for a signal, but what I understood was there was some question about what we can afford.
Well, yeah, we won't know that until we bid it and actually figure that out. With the way prices are these days in the midsummer now, I mean, it might be that the 100,000 is.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm getting at is, can the maps just indicate some sort of generic symbol for a signal?
Or school crossing.
Because the two reds over yellow is clearly a hop.
Yep, understood.
So, all I'm saying is, does using that symbol tie our hands down there if we accept the map as it is?
That makes sense.
Thanks, Cardinal.
I don't, if the symbol that's shown on the map is consistent with what our standard would have it be for school, for designated school crossing, I don't have any problem with it having the signal on there. The question of what we can afford, I think, comes, and what we're able to build in the first season comes after we get the price and we relate it to everything else that we're getting prices on.
This is like a safe walk to school master plan.
Right.
Here's our plan, this is what we're working towards. We might not get it all in 1 year, or 2 years, or 3 years, but this is, and then we work with the schools to say which is the most important. I'm going to suspect it's Baker.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't gone there yet with, you know, we can only afford to do this. That hasn't been the message. The message has been, let's identify where the spots need to be. Let's try to agree on the spots where they need to have them. Once the council agrees on it, the schools agree on it. Along the way, I thought we were trying to make sure that we weren't doing something arbitrary, so we were trying to create standards, right? If all of that can happen at the same time, I'm fine with advancing that to the point where we end up getting pricing.
Clear that.
The reason I asked about the solar thing is because if we leave this meeting, I assume you're going to be using the time between now and the next meeting, you know, to take something forward.
Because that's the other issue we haven't even gotten to yet, which is lighting. So there seemed to be a big concern about us adding lighting as well, or support for adding lighting as well, but that's going to cost, you know, we do have the teardrops, but we still have to pay for the pole, we have to pay to get power there, we have to decide where the lights go. If we're going to add on to the Central Street and order more when they do their order, we need to know that, because that's going to go on the Harbor Street for lighting there. So that's another, you know, $50,000, $70,000 on top of everything else, so.
So the walking maps will be updated though to show only one side of Forest, right?
Right.
Yes.
Right? Okay. I'm just reaffirming what I,
It's on the south side, right?
Yeah. You can
in
tell.
front of your house it is.
Yeah, it actually is in front of me. You can tell the one lady, we're gonna put it on the other side.
Steve, you had your hand up. I didn't mean to ignore it, so I wanted to finish my thought.
It was the point that you just made. These maps are a work in progress. For example, we have to make a correction for Forest now that it's been decided which side the sidewalk's going to be on. I believe we alluded to the fact that we were kind of using the base mapping that Carlisle Wortman had for sidewalks, but we found some mistakes. Sidewalks that existed that weren't showing on their map, sidewalks that supposedly were on the map except they don't exist, things like that. So over time, we're going to find other things that have to be reflected as we continually tune this up. So this is a work in progress. And if decisions are made that they're not going to be hawks, changing the symbol is not a big deal. It's just that if they are hawks, this is where we think is the most appropriate location for them to be. If you decide on a different type of control strategy, we'll work with, of course, to revise to make it all make sense.
The other thing too is throughout this process, we talked about education being important to the students, how to walk, where to walk. So having kind of these clear maps that match the field condition, whatever that ends up being, will be an important tool that then the schools can use to disseminate the information to parents about these are the routes. To answer that question about why not Hudson? Well, because the intended crossing is down between Inverness and Kensington, and that's the one that you should be instructing your children to do. So consistent and clear messaging is going to be a big part of this, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. As soon as the infrastructure goes in.
I have one too, so go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, you want me to go first?
Yeah.
So is there any, given the working process, is there any logic in showing these maps with the future Phase 2 route and the Mill Creek Park sidewalk? Can we add that?
I suppose you probably could. I think it would really, relative.
Trail, phase 2.
Phase 2 trail, can we add the future?
I think the main question will be,
Can we put it in to show a dash that it's future? Yeah.
Where it's coming out of the
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the question would just be relative to what areas are we servicing with that pathway, and the mile and a half Steve talked about. That maybe that's a shortcut to Westridge that now brings in more of that sub. So certainly more like a future condition, I'm sure you could show, and then whether it becomes part of the permanent map would be that part of that analysis.
The other part that you could consider is to have two versions of this. One which shows what you're planning to try to accomplish in the future years as a part of your planning process, and another that's displayed to parents who are wondering how to walk their child today.
Right.
This was developed in GIS. It was set up to be relatively user-friendly, and the idea is that at some point it could load up on the city's webpage, be provided to load up on the school district's webpage, that sort of thing. So you can show the future intent, but it might be cleanest for presentation to parents to just show that what's there today or planned to be in the very near future.
I'd like to reinforce how good an idea it is for our Phase 2 path.
That's true too.
Zach, Sarah, Paul, and Zach, how do you want to do it?
Okay.
Well, you go for it, because I had a side question.
Okay. On Baker Road, you expressed that the school wanted a different crossing there, but that it was closer to the roundabout.
Yes.
Where do they want that? Did they want it
if you think of the Creekside campus and the fact that they have that loop drive that passes right by the front door, where that exits, it's directly opposite another driveway that takes you into, what was that, Mills? Bates. They wanted it on the south side of that intersection of those two driveways.
They want it on the south side of the intersection,
South side of the intersection.
so that you can walk across to get to,
The bus hub.
Yeah.
Think about the easiest way between Creekside and the bus hub in your mind, and that's where they wanted
and
it.
you thought that, so what, in your criteria, you said it was too close to the,
Well, we thought it was relatively close to the roundabout. And again, recognizing that this is a high-volume road with relatively few gaps, if you put in the kind of device that traffic would have to stop, which is a hawk, would we be worrying about traffic from the roundabout backing up into this crossing location? Or this hawk-type signal backing traffic into the roundabout?
so did,
Both of those would be
I got
considered.
this.
But you actually answered that question when you actually answered that question the first time, and you said, of all the places that will clear the easiest,
It'll be the roundabout, yep.
it'd be the roundabout. So the fact that you're saying it today is not how you answered it to them. I mean, the fact that it's a concern in your report is not how you presented it when we talked to them.
What I believe,
That's a change in your discussion to us.
I suppose you could characterize it as some of the concerns that others were expressing. And the existing crossing location is so removed from the roundabout that this will never be even a remote likelihood.
it's the present location
The present
of
location.
that, of where that is.
Now,
The island,
I
they
don't,
don't the island.
personally, I don't think the roundabout traffic will ever back up the southbound traffic into the roundabout. I don't really believe that it'll ever back up into that crossing. But I think a hawk at the school district's desired location, it will back it into the roundabout. There's no question about that during the peak periods. But again, roundabouts clear very quickly. And it's just a question of, as it backs into the roundabout, that'll have to it'll get into almost like a gridlock condition. And it'll just take a little bit of time for it to spool all out and get moving again.
So I guess, if there is, I guess clarification on your part, are the schools set on that spot?
We haven't gone
That they
into
really need
information
to
with
have
them
it at that
yet.
spot to get the kids to that bus lot?
We haven't talked to them about it since it kind of changed from that initial conversation.
Yeah, the last conversation we had with them was mid-March to put the time frame together. It was mid-March when we were had the stand-up meeting around Dr. Timmis's table. And we were, coming away with them trying to finalize the walking map and their recommendations. So we haven't had another meeting to say, we think it should stay where it is.
Okay, I understand, I'm just trying.
But I think that if you go back to the original intent of they want to have the safest possible crossing between both sides of Baker Road. I don't think that they're going to argue that the north.
If I was a school board member right now and you told me that you had to take the kids to that present crosswalk and walk them up further Baker to cross to get to that bus lot, I think they would be upset with that. But I don't know that, I'm just saying, I would think that would be an issue. I'm just trying to make it, is there any other options that would be palatable to us, safety-wise, traffic-wise, that could compromise somewhere else? I don't know. I'm just trying to.
I'd have to defer. I mean, you could go between the drives. You could go north of those drives.
Yeah, again, I'm just trying to be respectful to the fact that you've built, you invested into that existing crossing, and it's at a good location. When we look at it, it's starting at the bus loop, if you wanted to head toward Baker Road, your choices are, you can kind of go to the northwest. There's an existing hard surface path that takes you to the east side, playground side of that Bates School.
And behind the cemetery and that, correct?
Yeah, and then you just keep going up to the campus drive, which is near where the existing crossing is. But you do have some adverse travel to come back to the actual main doors at Creekside. Compared to that, you can still do that, but then you have to try to go around the south side instead of the north side of Bates School. So that's one path that would take you toward where what they indicated their desired location was. A second version would be they'd have to build it, but a connection to those that sidewalk that was built recently with the zigzag to get down the grade, that big grade change that's there. And again, whether you're looking, either way you get around the south side compared to the north side, we figure it's a little over 400-foot difference, with the longer distance being to go to the existing crossing.
So I guess, I got this thing of a parent saying, geez, my kid's gonna be out there and have for another 400 yards.
400 feet.
400
yards.
feet. You know, on a cold day when we, I'm just trying to make it easier.
Well,
But I don't know how the school thinks anymore at all. I mean, I'll say that right now.
What Courtney and I think are saying, trying to say together is, you're seeing it first, we're gonna get a meeting set up with them on it. We'll get their thoughts, but then it's gonna, I'd like to see it come back where we get the standards and the map adopted and be able to give them some direction to finish up going to a bid document.
I just know what we've been going through in the school and trying to see if there's any way we can make that transition any better. It may not happen.
Zach, thanks for waiting.
Well, so it seems like we've kind of discussed this, so this is a bit of a tangential question. At the high school, for either or both of the student representatives, how many folks there are walking or biking? Is it a tiny bit? Is it a medium amount?
I go to a private school in Ann Arbor, so.
Okay, so
Tiny bit, I would say, not that many. Most people either take the bus, or they either get a ride with upperclassmen.
okay.
I know my sister goes to Mill Creek and she walks home every day.
Okay.
Do you know, does she cross at the light at Meadowview?
Yes, and then she comes down behind the subdivision.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. Okay, so that's the update, so we'll be trying to schedule that meeting. We've already reached out to Dr. Timmis or Sharon about the meeting. We don't have a date yet.
No, I didn't. I've waited till after this meeting, and then I will be there.
Oh, yeah, staff would be in the meeting, I guess. So we're working on getting the meeting set up. Any further discussion on this? Does it look like it's headed in the right direction, the council?
Yeah. Well, it's good to see progress on this.
Yeah.
Okay, new business item L2, thank you both.
Thanks.
Steve, appreciate it. New business item L2 is discussion of the Central Street project and the road funding. Courtney, I'll let you introduce.
So, as you all are aware, the Central Street project came in higher than our engineer's estimate. We did tell MDOT that we were going to move forward with the project because, it's between $540,000 and $640,000 we're getting from the federal government through the state, so it's not something that we want to give up. I included two different versions of the municipal street fund summary that show the increased cost. One that shows borrowing the funds from another fund temporarily. The other raises the millage rate for a year. There are some unknowns. We could still receive the $250,000 grant for Central Street. I think it's unlikely, especially given that they just released the 2019 grants, and I didn't even recognize most of the communities on the list. I think they're going to very small communities that are poor.
Poor, you said?
Yeah. Then, local community stabilization funds, that's still up in the air. I mean, that could maybe be another $100,000 that we could put towards this, but we won't know that until the end of May either. And then the bid price for the pedestrian safety project, which, again, we just discussed. So this is just really a discussion item as a informational. The action is really in the millage rate because we have to decide what we're gonna publish. So if council isn't interested in changing the millage rate, then we'll publish that ad, and that's the next L3. But if council is interested in at least publishing it with the mill increase, we can do that. And then, like I said, I attached, well, there's a memo from OHM that kind of breaks down the cost. Though you were talking to the road commission, and they had like 60% of their projects that were on this bid letting come in over 10%.
That was actually, of the May 3rd letting, there was 85 projects bid, and 60% of them were over 10% over budget.
Total.
Total.
And a lot of them were the road commission's projects fell the same. So, yeah, and then there's the street fund summaries that show the kind of implications. I mean, borrowing the money, it probably wouldn't get repaid for a few years.
That's what I don't like about that option.
Right, and then using the one-year millage, you know, I was hesitant about that because of the increases in the sewer and the refuse. But unfortunately, it's just expensive to do these projects. I don't know what else to say. You know, I mean,
Is the 1 mil increase, that's for the streets fund?
just streets.
Okay.
Yeah, it goes from, well, it's in the ad, it goes from 3.8 to
Well,
3.4 to 4.1.
my thought, Jim, is the extra mill will generate $230,000 and basically cover the difference in the Central Street project. That was, you know, the overrun, or not the overrun, the higher bid. And then, you know, next year you just bring it back down.
Actually,
I mean, unless you have a different priority to do more or something,
Right.
but, you know, we're gonna be getting more bids, but that would be my thought, then streets is paying for streets.
And it still would be 0.4 mils below what the voters approved it could go up to with the adjustments.
Right. That's what I'd like to advertise, you know, in the next item, in the L3 item, but.
just a little cleaner.
We may still not pay the borrowers and doing that. That might cost, so.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, you could do more than a mil, but it was what we discussed, you know, for the purpose of this discussion, 1 mil is a round number. But, you know, I don't think, there's nobody that doesn't want to do Central Street, right? Everybody still thinks we should be doing this priority. We've come this far, right? It's 540,000, potentially 640, depending on if we get the 25% of it.
I will say the contractor actually reached out to me, seeked my number, found me, gave me a call, Sponson, which I was appreciative of them giving us a call. They're, I think, a pretty good contractor. They did the 4th leg of the roundabout for Granger last summer. I've worked with them. It's been a number of years. I have not worked with them recently, but generally, it's, you know, good experience. So I think you have a reputable contractor. I think there was 3 bids total, which are fairly tight. I think just the reality of the point in the season we're at in May, a lot of contractors have work, so we didn't get quite as much traffic as we would expect in a bid. I want to say the Ann Arbor Street project a couple of years ago, we had probably 8 to 10 bidders, I'd want to say, on that one. So this is you know, not quite as much bid traffic. And probably the biggest thing, just to, I guess, to highlight, like, how do we get to this point? The big changes were asphalt. Comparatively, last year, we were paying around $90 a ton for asphalt on the Baker Road roundabouts. That was bid in May. And this year, it's almost $110 for that. So it's a pretty significant thing, because it's a big item on the contract. The other large item was underground storm sewer pipe. I couldn't quite understand the reason for that, but talking with Fonson, what they're telling me is trucking costs, sand and gravel were higher. So because our sewers are fairly deep in a few spots, that number kind of added up as they started to put their numbers together. But we'll try to work, if we are going forward with this, try to find areas within the contract, if there's anything we can do some value engineering, bring that back to staff and see if we can, save a few dollars here or there.
Thank you for the summary and the well-written letter. Any questions? Or okay to move on to L3? Okay, new business item L3 is a consideration item. We're setting a public hearing, and we need to determine which millage rate to advertise.
I move the one with the 4.4075 mils for the streets,
Okay.
which would be page 152.
Moved by Zach, second by Jim, was it? Discussion? So we're advertising a total of 15.3062 mils. No questions, no hands? Everybody's good? Okay, thank you, Ms. Jones, if you'd call the vote, to start the public hearing.
Bell.
Yes.
Cousins.
Yes.
Fisher.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Michelle's.
Yes.
Knight. Keo.
Yes, motion carries. Thank you, everyone. We're down to council comments. I will let Andrew go first. Do you have any comments to make this evening? No. No? Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith? Ms. Jones, anything to add?
Yeah, I just received word today that the farm at 5800 Nass Road has now become a centennial farm of the Michigan Historical Society. That's the one across from where my dad lives. It's been in the family since 1904. It's going to be a couple months before we get that nice plaque out there.
That's really good news there.
Ms. Fisher? Mr. Cousins?
Two quick things. I was honored to be at the hospital fundraiser, Chelsea Hospital, Friday night at the Farming Farms. And the last year we raised $750,000, and this year was over $1 million. It's amazing the amount of money that's been raised for that hospital over the last 10 years for that. And so it's been, that was an honor. And the other honor is that I was asked by Sean this week to be able to step in for him for the speech there at just the welcome for Memorial Day. So happy to do that, and
Thank you for doing that.
they were welcome.
I'll get you the canned speech.
That's good. But if Ray can do it, I probably will pull it off. Okay.
You'll do
I'll
great.
give it a good
You'll
shot.
do great.
I probably won't wear shorts like Ray had.
Zach, you're up next, please.
Yep, so recently, City of Chelsea appointed a member of their planning commission to CapDART to come attend, and I think that's kind of a good idea, because if you have conflicting meetings, there's going to be representation, and they bring a different perspective than elected officials, so I think that's something I want to see if someone from the planning commission would like to participate with that. The last bit, after the last meeting, I was so restless that I didn't sleep well for 2 nights. My wife on the second day got sick of it and said, use our emergency credit card, go to the fire conference. So I'm actually jumping in the car after this and going there. I've got plans, we got scale plans earlier. If anyone had, and I did pay to meet with an architect to have them ask that, so if anyone has questions they specifically like me to have them ask, send that to me. I've got email sessions scheduled for Wednesday afternoon sometime. So if you have any specific questions, let me know. And that's all that I've got.
Okay. Safe travels to you.
Yeah, I should get there around 2 in the morning, so I'll have 6 hours before the first session.
Remember, you get 1 hour.
We're down to non-arranged participation. Seeing none, I will seek a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Fisher, second by Bell, all in favor?
Aye.
Have a good evening, everyone, and a happy Memorial Day.
Thanks.
Yep.